What's up? Welcome back to the State of the Arc podcast. My name is Mike.
My name's Kason.
Today we're covering Chapter 3 of Final Fantasy Tactics.
It's called The Valiant.
The Valiant.
Wonder what that's a reference to.
Well, let's find out.
The Valiant Enemy.
We left off with Larg and Goltanna, like moving headlong into this War of the Lions,
yeah.
where Larg crowns Prince Orrinus, Goltanna crowns Ovelia, and so they're supporting different candidates, and they are regents for those candidates, and they're now, the war is full scale.
They have to go to war. I really like the very beginning of the chapter. It starts you off, just a conversation of, I believe it's, Orlando, and it's that group, right?
Yeah, Goltanna at Fort Basilet.
And they're just talking about how the war's going. Because right at the end, you've got, thus begins the Lion War, right? That was kind of the very last part before Chapter 3. And now, instead of seeing any battles or anything, we're just hearing people talk about it.
Yes.
And I think it's actually really good.
Yeah.
I actually liked it a lot. Because we have an objective overview of the results of the war, I wrote down here, over 200,000 people have been killed.
Yeah.
Massive starvation and drought, supply issues, over 100,000 refugees. It's crazy. And this is all because two people are bickering over which one of them gets to sit on the golden chair.
Yep, that's exactly right.
It's really good though. It's a good job. It's a good storytelling technique to get you you're seeing the results of war, and it's horrific. It's really, really jacked.
Yes.
And they're just talking about it, and it's just holy crap! It's crazy.
I particularly took note of the attitude about this. So all of that is reported.
Yeah.
And then the Marquis de Limberry is doesn't matter about the famine. Doesn't matter about the death toll, doesn't matter about the wounded. We expected all of that. No, it's the drought that threatens us. The markets are empty and tax collections fall short.
Ah, that's right. They need to raise taxes.
It's the problem here is not that the people are dying and suffering.
Nope.
It's not famine, it's drought. And it's because there are no people selling stuff that we can tax.
Because they can't make a profit. Yeah.
They can't continue their war effort without the taxes.
Yep. So they're raising taxes, but they do another thing. They raise it up to 30, 40%, way too high. And then they include enforcement as well.
Yeah.
They're and also go and arrest anyone who is selling grain without paying any taxes on it. So it's they're really going to enforce this. And it's all to fund the war effort, and it just becomes kind of a money thing.
It's crazy. And
so I wrote here, where's Gafgarion when you need him? He'd be like, wow, you people are horrible. Throughout the whole meeting, he'd just be like, I can't believe what I'm hearing. And they'd all just ignore him.
Yeah. Things are no better for Larg, and they're all talking about that too. Yeah. It's in fact, many of their refugees from Zeltenia are going over to Larg's territory.
Yeah.
And one of the guys there, Blanche. Viscount, I think is his title. Blanche.
Cool.
He's let him go. Then he can take care of them, right?
Yeah, there's mouths to feed.
We don't need to worry about those people now. It's just
that's ridiculous.
This such a dismissive attitude towards the suffering of the people of Ivalice.
Yeah, and
they just don't care at all.
Their own people. And the only person at that whole meeting talking about, hey, maybe we could engage in some peace talks or something.
Yeah.
Is Orlando. And everyone's just shut up, Orlando. Shut up. We're not talking about peace. We're talking about war. Anyway, and they keep talking, and Orlando brings it up again. He's like, yeah, but that peace is sounding mighty, mighty good right now with the drought coming along and all. And they basically, I think it's a Goltanna. It's okay, Orlando, if you bring up peace one more time, I'm going to kill you. And it's crazy. But I get the feeling that this is kind of what happens, behind closed doors with a lot of, especially authoritarian, monarch type situations where it's you don't say certain things or it's off with your head, right?
Yeah. Orlando says, in the 50 Years' War, who bore a greater burden than they, meaning the people? Would you thank them now with higher taxes? We cannot long sustain this war. It is a matter of resources and resolve. And then that's when Goltanna's like, resolve? Like, do you not have resolve? Like, and Orlando tries to say, in the 50 Years' War, we were honor-bound to fight because our land was being trespassed by a foreign nation.
And this time it's harder to justify why you're fighting.
Yeah, and he's like, so there's no honor in this? And so they're going back and forth, and Goltanna tries to make it about this is being fought for the people too. You know, the crown is so corrupt.
I did write a note
things
there.
Like that.
There was one decent point made by Goltanna, which is the point made by all authoritarians, right?
Yes.
And it is, of course, Goltanna has a point. This is what I wrote. Living under tyrant kings would bring about a great deal of problems as well. Their people wouldn't come out well on that end either.
Yeah.
So given the fact that they're the South, they're the rebels, they're the ones, if they lose, then they'll be seen as, oh, these are the people who, they're our problem. We're going to start giving them harsher penalties and things like that. We're going to kind of hold a grudge against people from that region. Right. And the kings, the tyrannical kings, would not do well. Their people wouldn't do well under the North's kingship either. Decent point. I don't think it excuses all of this.
It's more of a justification.
Exactly.
By the time the people are suffering at this level anyways.
Yes.
It's like, you know, they're trying to justify the short term.
We already started war.
Suffering.
So we have to keep
will
doing
lead
it.
to a less corrupt crown, right?
Yes,
of
which
course,
means the people suffer less, theoretically.
Of course, they're just as corrupt as the other side.
No, and I think what you just said, that sentence, I write that like 4 or 5 different times in this chapter. Like, turns out the new king's just as corrupt as the old king.
Yeah, and so he gets really fed up with Orlando's. He calls him. I think he calls him a coward by the end of it.
Yeah, sure.
He's like, I think Blanche says something like. Because his nickname is the Thunder God, right?
TG.
Yeah.
That's what they call him.
It's a TG. And he says something like, I don't know the exact line, but something like, your reputation as the Thunder God, this is more like of a slight breeze or a slight stir of the wind or something like that, given the way you're talking right now, right?
Yeah.
And so he and Sid kind of go back and forth, and he gets pissed off by that. I'll not sit and suffer these insults. And anyways, they're all upset at Orlando, who's the only one who seems to be concerned about people rather than power.
Yep.
So it gives you a bit of insight as to, because we've seen the scheming of Larg and Dycedarg.
We've seen Dycedarg's side of it, the Beowulf side.
Right, and it's like, okay, we've seen the corruption there
they're
early
crap.
in the story.
We get it.
Now we've seen it here too.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, there's no winners in this situation.
Yes.
The people do not win no matter who wins this.
Exactly.
So it's like the whole thing is really bad.
That is the human condition.
Yes, it is. Okay, so after that scene ends, Ramza decides to head to talk to his brother Zalbag and to try to explain the situation to him. He seems to think like Zalbag might have a greater sense of honor than Dycedarg. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure where Ramza's getting this idea. Well, it sort of confirms my interpretation earlier that he has a closer relationship with Zalbag than he does with Dycedarg.
I could see that. I took it as he thought they were both great. He liked Dycedarg and Zalbag a lot. And now he has very good evidence that Dycedarg is bad, but he doesn't yet have clear evidence that Zalbag is bad. And so,
aside from the fact that he gave the order to shoot Teacher. He already thought they were both great. Because he was there when
that was Zalbag
told...
I thought that was Dycedarg.
No, Zalbag told Algus to shoot Teacher.
Oh, I got the brothers confused at that moment.
Maybe Ramza thinks that Zalbag doesn't care about commoners, but he's at least got some sense of noble honor in regards to there's corruption or our brother Dycedarg is dealing underhandedly. This is not an honorable knightly thing to do. Maybe Zalbag will be convinced by that. I'm not sure what he's thinking about going to Zalbag here, honestly, but he's going to try to tell him.
He doesn't have a lot of options. Right.
Well, he's also learned
He's on the
since
run.
then about the whole Church of Glabados, like actually puppeteering this whole thing.
Yeah.
And he probably wants to appeal to that too. It's like, you guys think you're the ones doing the like pulling the strings, but it's actually not. It's actually the church, right?
Yeah.
So he wants to try to explain this to Zalbag in hopes that he'll do something about it. So he's on his way to the royal city of Lazalia to tell him that. But on the way, there's you're in Gulland, I think is.
Yeah, Goland Coal City.
Yeah, and you meet a character here, Orran Durai, who wrote the Durai report or the Durai papers that Arislam is revealing in the present day or the future or whatever. The historian who's looking back at this. This is the guy who wrote the history that is now being revealed. And he is Sid's, the Thunder God's, adopted son. So he's...
Adoption was a common thing in this game, it seems.
Yeah. You need an heir.
Right.
And it's like you don't have a son or whatever. Sons die of disease or whatever.
Right, all the time.
Then you gotta have somebody to pass it on to. But he's in trouble in the scene. He's being chased by some thieves.
It's like he accidentally discovered their hideout. Because he shouts back, he's like, guys, like, next time put a sign up that says, like, don't come in, we're having a secret hideout meeting. We're having a thieves guild meeting, and they're just like, shut up, they're just going to kill him. Yeah. I got the impression that he was a lowly peasant based on this. Like, oh, poor dude, just kind of wandered in, he's defenseless.
Right.
I was actually kind of surprised to find out who he is.
He seems to be involved, at least in hunting down deserters later on, but in some form of intelligence gathering. Or
usually he has a squad with him. He's got a group of people with him.
And in the meeting, they do mention that Orran informed me this and this and this, so like maybe he's not necessarily a spy in the strict sense, but at least does some reconnaissance work.
Yeah, he's like probably a middle rank or so in the military there.
So we save him from these thieves.
Yeah.
And it's a pretty short scene. It's more or less just them meeting for the first time, shaking hands, seeming to like resonate one with another. It's like, hey, you're a bro, thanks. Like, hope I cross your path again someday.
Olan noticed something about us right before that.
Is he Olan?
It's Olan.
It's literally every freaking R and L is backwards in this game. That's crazy to me.
It's pretty funny.
At least most of the time it's like, oh,
you'd think 50-50. Yeah.
25, 50% of them will be right. It's like every time they get it wrong in this game. It's crazy.
Oh, man. So he notices something about us, and he kind of like does a double take and then says, oh, he doesn't really bring it up, but it seemed like he recognized us.
Yeah.
But he won't say exactly what that meant. So he may know who we are, but we don't know who he is.
Right. And we'll get another scene with him here. So that's a pretty short scene. Ramza makes his way to the royal city of Lazalia, and this is where he confronts Zalbag, and tries to ask him, like, is there no way we can just end the fighting here? This is ridiculous, right? Like, this is not an honorable war that we're fighting. He also tries to tell him about Dycedarg's role in the attempted assassination of Ovelia. And Zalbag does not believe him. He's like,
he doesn't at all,
you're lying, like, how dare you? I actually took down the dialogue here. But he's like, get out of my sight kind of thing. Go back to Egros and just like leave me alone. Like, he really is upset and disturbed by the fact that Ramza would try to implicate his own brother.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And
is not loyal.
Yeah. So he talks about trust, like, how can you not trust your own blood, like these sorts of things. And Ramza says to him, you speak of trust, Zalbag, yet you show me none in kind. And his response is, what have you ever done to inspire my trust? The mistake was my own. Until today, I had looked on you as a true brother. but your mother's common blood forever stains you common. You are not fit to bear the Beowulf name. It's like, that's an intense dismissal from Zalbag.
He's very upset at us.
And Ramza is like, you can't mean that. He's really struck. He's really hurt by that, I feel. And that's when the soldiers come in.
And Zalbag just leaves.
Yeah.
What happens later on, and we'll get to that a little bit later, but when we get accused of being a heretic, is that Zalbag who reported us?
I don't think so.
You don't? Okay.
Because they would have to have come from probably Lionel or some other
far away
place. I guess the Inquisition could have been. This is the royal city, the royal capital, Lazalia.
Because it happens pretty soon after. Like we have an argument.
Possible.
Zalbag doesn't trust us. He basically disowns us, and then all of a sudden we're getting arrested for heresy.
Yeah, I guess I don't know the answer to that question, but I suppose that the Inquisition, that order could be from Lazalia, where we are now. I guess I'm not sure why I did, but I had the impression that they had like traveled there, like sort of following Ramza around, trying to like track him down. But I don't know if that's true or not. If they're from the city, then they would have had to heard news. The heretic is here. He's gone to see his brother at the castle or whatever. Let's go there now. So I'm not sure where they came from. But yeah, Zalbag is told the Thunder God broke through some defenses. We got to go meet him now, and he just like runs out. And so as Ramza is getting ready to leave, Alma comes out to talk to him.
Yeah.
He explains to her that Delita is still alive, that he's possibly allied with some really dangerous people in the Church of Glabados. He's worried about that. That Dycedarg plotted Ovelia's assassination. And remember, Alma and Ovelia were friends.
Yeah.
In
at the monastery.
Yeah. Right. And I really liked this line that Ramza says about that. He says, "I'm sure he had his reasons, but I cannot see them for the blood." And that's really good line. It's like
it is.
He's trying really hard to like understand people in this game. I feel like he's a person who it's really important to him that he understands others, and he tries really hard to get into their shoes and see their reasons, but he just can't seem to understand anybody because he's so good-hearted, and he can't seem to understand. There's actually something pretty similar when we were reading the Silmarillion for our old book club, where it talks about the fact that like Manwë had a hard time sort of anticipating Morgoth's plots to like undo what they had made, and he had a hard time like anticipating because he couldn't understand the heart of an evil person.
Right. Yeah.
And it's just like because he doesn't think that way himself. It doesn't occur to him that somebody would be capable of thinking that or doing that.
Yeah.
And I get a little bit of that from Ramza. And the whole game he's been like that. He just can't seem to, no, my brothers can't be like that. No, that can't be right. He can't seem, he's trying his hardest, but he's really struggling to understand the hearts of deceitful, evil human beings who only want more power and don't care about others when he is such a empathetic person and doesn't care about power, doesn't care about reward for doing good deeds. It's just, it's so beyond his understanding that people could think that way. And so he's still trying to see Dycedarg's perspective. I'm sure he had his reasons, but I cannot see them for the blood. It's just, I can't understand it. It just, the blood that is on his hands it makes it impossible for me to justify, right? It's a great line.
This is one of the difficulties with the video game genre, but it is a very interesting line given, I don't know how many people do you think Ramza's killed so far in the game?
Good question.
Like 100?
A lot.
500?
Probably not 500. Because these battles are pretty small.
Yeah, but they're like 6, 7, and there's like a bunch of them. I'd say he's killed about 100 people. Like him himself, maybe less.
Yeah, but his
like 30,
party probably responsible
20.
for at least 100 to 150, something like that.
Yeah. I have a hard time understanding Ramza's perspective for the blood. for the blood on
I
his
guess
hands.
it depends on, because a lot of times he does try to avoid fighting.
Yeah,
And he's
yeah.
attacked. And so it's
Yeah.
more self-defense, or it's like he's commanded, it's a military sort of action, It's like he was not in command, he was a cadet or
Right,
told.
as a strategic thing.
So it's a little different than Dycedarg's plotting to murder a princess who is not on the field of battle or something like that, right? Just for the sake of power gain. So I get your point, and it's true. I guess I see what's the word for it? What is the word I'm looking for? Like the guilt or shame that would be associated with the killing, not to be at the same level, because in war, it's like if you're a soldier,
right,
you have to fight. it's not the same as murdering somebody, right? Like
right.
on the field, a military target, whatever it might be. But yes, there's a lot of blood on Ramza's hands as well, for sure.
I just had to bring that up.
Then
It's just how video games are.
Yes. Well, I think it's a lot worse in games like Uncharted or something.
Oh, where it's like thousands and it's just you and it's literal, just like.
I mean, they are
mowing
mostly
them
in
down.
self-defense, but it's like you don't have to be there searching for this treasure.
I gotta get that money, man. Gotta get paid.
Mowing down with like machine guns,
Yeah.
tons and tons of people. Or like, driving through civilian towns and just like wrecking the freaking place and destroying its economy.
Hey, those people would all understand if he just explained to them that it wasn't his fault. He was being chased. He had to kill all those people.
Yeah.
They were gonna kill him. Okay.
Okay, then we get the confessor, Zalmor Lucianata,
Yeah,
the
he
Holy
shows up.
Office of the Inquisition. I come to bring you before the office on charges of murder of Cardinal de la Croix and suspicion of heresy. Yeah, so he's like, basically, which is very true of history. If you don't surrender, that is an admission of guilt.
Yes,
And
well,
therefore-
especially in the medieval times. Yes, absolutely.
Just like, my gosh, dude. It's
Silence is an admission of guilt. You do not have a right to be silent.
Yep.
The way you do modern times. You never. That's a very recent
Yes.
invention. That was not a thing before. It's like you better defend. It's guilty until proven innocent.
Yeah.
That's how it used to be.
It's like, if you come with us, obviously we're going to find you guilty because that's what we do. If you don't, then you're guilty because you're running away. Or whatever.
Of course, it's the witch trials. Yeah, it's a witch trial.
It's exactly what this is. This whole thing, right? It's just a
Yeah.
sham.
Yep.
Ramza doesn't buy it.
Yeah, kills them all.
You fight them off. I believe Lucianata himself does the whole warping escape thing, right? He gets
Yeah,
away.
that's a convenient thing that keeps happening.
At the end of most battles, there's a important guy who runs away like that. But
Yeah.
he's trying to understand at the end how the Office of Inquisition could have learned about the Aura site, right? So this leads me to believe that the Office of Inquisition is in a separate place from where the
it's not.
Cardinal was in Lionel.
It's not Zalbag.
And,
Gotcha.
well, Zalbag, I don't think he told Zalbag about Aura site.
Yeah, because they mentioned the Aura site. They mentioned the murder of Delacroix. I don't think that we told Zalbag all that stuff.
Yes.
Right? Does
right.
he know that we were the
Well,
ones that did
he
that?
has been branded a heretic, and they knew the Cardinal's dead. So I think there's a rumor that Ramza has killed the Cardinal going around.
Okay.
But the Office of Inquisition knowing about the Aura site implicates like the whole church itself, not just like the Cardinal or a few key
It's
like
like the
leaders
whole
in the
thing.
church. It's like, okay, the whole church
Yeah.
is in on this Zodiac Brave summoning plot. And this is not good.
Yeah.
Like, this is more widespread than I thought. And he starts to wonder about whether Delita is working for the church itself. And so he's talking with Alma about this. She convinces him because it takes a long time because he's like, no, you can't come. No, you can't come with me. No, you can't come with me.
Yeah, I really thought she'd be in our party. I was like, it's going to happen.
And she convinces him to let her come.
Only to a point.
At first, she's like, I just fought against the Inquisitors. Like, I'm obviously a heretic now. They're going to come after me. Even that's not enough to convince Ramza to bring her along. He's like, just go apologize and repent or whatever the hell you have to do. Make up any excuse. I made you do it. Like, whatever, right? But it's not until she's like, you are a heretic. You're like a wanted man. You're not just going to be able to go into Orran Monastery. I studied there. I can help you get in.
Yes.
Right? They'll recognize me and all that stuff.
She became useful.
So he's like, okay, fine. Once that's over, you're coming back.
Yeah.
And promise me that. She's like, okay, I promise. Like, I'm holding you to that. Like, that's the end of this for you.
And unfortunately, she doesn't stay with us for very long.
No, doesn't work out.
But in that conversation, because he's trying to convince him, oh, just go beg forgiveness, you'll be fine. Everyone likes you, you'll be great, it'll be fine. Yeah. And it's like she says, Dycedarg would desert me to protect Beowulf. I don't know how it's worded in more of the lines.
The Beowulf house, yeah.
That's more or less it. And Ramza's response is, yes, he is capable of that.
Yep.
And so it's like, yeah, what Ramza thought could protect him or Alma or anybody has slowly turned into a thing that is a threat now, and it won't actually protect anybody.
Yeah. And the other thing, she was like trying to withhold information until he promised her that he would take her with him, right? Because she knows that the Virgo stone is at Orran Monastery.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
Which is like a whole tip for where you should go next. And he's like, okay, fine, I'll go there. You can't come though. And then she's like, but you don't know the people at Orran. I do. You're a branded heretic. I can help you get it. That's the only thing that convinces him to let her come. But when they arrive at Orran Monastery, it's already sacked, and like a ton of people are dead. Like a ton of the priests.
Yeah.
And like elders and things like that. Elder Simon is wounded. So I guess the way I see this in my head is like they arrive there, and it's like, okay, maybe she was. I do wish there was more of one more sort of transitional scene, because it kind of just opens up there just inside the monastery. There's not like a little bit of a time spent. Okay, here's the plan, right? Like we're gonna put you in some kind of like hooded robe or something. I'm gonna tell them you're this person. They'll accept me. I'll go talk to Elder Simon and explain what's going on, and like some attempt to be like, okay, here's the plan for how we're going to get in. And then they arrive and it's like, everyone's dead. Mm-hmm. It's like, oh my gosh, what happened? Run in there. Then the scene where they find Simon, right?
Yeah, that would have been better.
I feel like that would have transitioned better from Lazalia into Orran, but...
the transitions in this game are difficult because it's all just one square setting.
Yeah,
block.
Just like a little...
The scenes, it's like a stage play almost, right? Like a theater, where it all just happens there, and there isn't a good transition way to go from one place to the next. It's just scene's over and then it's a new scene, right?
Yeah, they kind of...
And it's all static. It's in
They
one
usually
place.
Either fade to black or they'll like raise the camera up into black and then down from that kind of a thing. But yeah, the little diorama sets, right? They're pretty small, and it's like a lot of the story has to take place on just the same set on which there's a battle, generally. So they kind of have to use a battle set for telling the story as well.
For all that stuff, yeah.
Outside of the War of the Lions, like hand-drawn cutscenes.
Oh, those ones, yeah.
Anyways, Elder Simon explains that the church is seeking to restore itself to prominence by taking the stones. So he knows about, the plot going on, and he's been turning a blind eye to it. I really liked how Simon, like the way that his character's written in the scene. I thought it was really good. So he's perfectly capable at this point of voicing the church is manipulating Larg and Goltanna, pitting them against each other to weaken them and to get the people against them, so that they will turn to the church for salvation. Right? That this is what they're doing, so that the church can become a prominent, powerful, governing force again in Ivalice. He's willing to admit that conspiracy up to that point. But what's really interesting is what Ramza says after that Simon has a hard time putting into words himself because he really does not. He knows it's true, but he just does not want to believe that his church is capable of it, right? So Simon says, as a first step, they have set dukes Larg and Goltanna against one another to whittle down their military might. The longer the fighting lasts, the weaker the dukes become, and the more the people lose faith in the crown. And Ramza's so done with that part of it, that's like not important. He says, and by gathering these stones and reviving the Zodiac Braves, what do they hope to gain from such a show? And Elder Simon can't, he's like, oh, well, of course, they're trying to win over the people. They're trying to like get the people under their side. It's like, that doesn't explain the Lucavi.
Yeah.
And Simon at that point basically says, you look so much, you have the demeanor so much of your father.
Oh, of course.
Maybe you have what it takes to stop their ambitions. He can't out loud admit that Lucavi demons have like infiltrated his church and are using the stones for great evil, like demonic purposes.
Yeah.
But he was willing to explain at least that they were trying to rise politically.
Right.
But he like can't seem to bring himself to say, yeah, demons have infested my church.
Yeah.
And so all he can do is say, I think you might have what it takes to stop this. I just really liked the way his dialogue was written there, because it would be so painful for somebody who had dedicated their whole lives, right?
Oh yeah, he's an old guy, yeah.
To service of this Church of Glabados and giving his faith to it, to then have it unravel in this way. And yeah, he's definitely been turning a blind eye to it. He didn't want to believe it, even though he knew it was happening. And he admits his sin in this, right? So currently, I think Confessor Marcel is down there with some other people trying to find the Virgo stone, like down in the, in the archives, right?
Yeah.
There's a new character introduced here, Isilud.
Oh, Isilud, yeah.
He's actually the son of Falmarv, who we realize this later. We see this later when we're at like Duke Barrington's castle. He's a really interesting character, though. He, Isilud, does not know what's really going on here. He's convinced that what the church is doing is for the sake of the people. This is to change, to make all men equal, to destroy this sort of hierarchy of nobles and commoners, to like balance out the power for the people, that sort of thing. I took a lot of the dialogue here because it's really quotable and just really well written.
Okay.
So he says to Ramza, "You are a Beov. Why do you not heed your brother's counsel? Why?" And Ramza says, "It is because I'm a Beov that I do not heed them. The Beov name stands for truth and justice. It is not a tool to be used for selfish gain." Later on in the battle, Isilud says, "The Church of Glabados envisions a world devoid of class divides, a world where all men can live as equals. Saint Ajora spoke of such a utopia. It is the promised land he foretold. Ivalice lists Ramza." So I looked up this term. List is like a nautical term for when the ship is teetering like this.
List. Okay, sure.
So the ship is listing, right? It's a whole metaphor he's using here.
Okay.
Ivalice lists Ramza and threatens to founder. Should we fail to right her course, the storm will claim her. And Ramza says, "It is you who churn the waves. You orchestrate this entire conflict." Such like a pointed, quick retort. It's like he's trying to build this case, and he just like topples the foundation of that case in one sentence. And then Isilud goes on, "Change does not come without cost. Revolution requires martyrs, and we require revolution. The crown is rotten, the nobility corrupt. They must be made to pay. The people deserve their justice. Join us, as your once friend Delita has." And Ramza says, "You would free the people only to enslave them anew with the demonic power of the stones." And this is where you learn that Isilud has no idea what he's talking about.
Yes.
Like demonic power. The Zodiac stones are vessels of the gods. So not everybody in the church who is a Knight Templar in the church knows like what's really going on here. They believe that what they're doing is in service of God or in protection of the people to destroy the nobility and the corruption of the nobility. So he believes that the ambitions of the church are noble. And there are others in the church who do as well. So it's not everybody is like keen on what's actually going on, right?
Yeah.
Wygraf ends up showing up here, though. Last time we saw him, he was being recruited by some mysterious figure out in the Linolian
when
Plains
he went out,
to like visit his sister's grave.
And now he's here, and he doesn't seem like just your average thief anymore. I mean, he wasn't that to begin with, but he seems like he's got a bunch of knights working for him now. It's not just what was the word for it? Whatever, the rebellion people.
The Corpse Brigade.
The Corpse Brigade, yeah. He's moved beyond that, and he's got some more money behind him, it seems.
Now he's a Knight Templar.
There you go.
And
so
he's
the
ready.
Church found him.
He is ready to get his revenge on Ramza here. But Isilud escapes from like underground, right, when you fight him there. And he's up now where Wygraf is, and they're kidnapping Alma. Alma didn't hide well enough.
And we told her anytime it's like, hey, you wait here, or I don't know, the kid, it's imminent that something bad's going to happen.
They're not going to be able to. She was supposed to take care of Simon and hide, and Ramza gave her the Zodiac stones he carries, Taurus and I think one other one. Can't remember.
Oh yeah, that's true.
Oh, it was the one from
I can't remember the 12.
Chuchuchalan or the Cardinal de la Croix or whatever. The one that he held, I can't remember which one that was.
I can't either.
Anyways, 2 of the Zodiac stones he gives to Alma. Now those have fallen into Isilud's hands, who is kidnapping her, and Wygraf, right? So they're taking her away. You come out and have a fight with Wygraf there. And again, I love the fencing of words that they do in this game. It's like an element that I just, in particular, I've just a really strong taste for really witty, sharp dialogue back and forth, battling of wits and philosophy, where it's like each makes good points, and it feels like
what an evenly matched battle of giants.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Not
it's like,
just,
wow, this is so cool.
Not just in the fighting, but in the ability to make a case or to argue or debate.
Yes. Yeah.
I really like that.
Thinking.
And this game is full of that. And so Wygraf and Ramza are doing this back and forth, just like Isilud and Ramza were doing down in the basement area. And I loved this line. This line was really good in War of the Lions. Wygraf, at the end of this, ends up saying, "Your envenomed words succor me, for when at last you yield, as you must, their poison will consume you." Ooh. It's just beastly line.
That's great. So it's like he's storing up all the venom just so that he can like throw it back on us once we realize we're wrong, and it'll hurt all the more.
Yes, exactly right.
We didn't just lose in battle; we lost our philosophy lost.
Yes.
That's like the meta. I actually talk about this a little later here, but that's like the meta idea of the gods, a battle of the gods, right?
Yeah.
A battle of ideas and a battle between cultures and philosophies is, in essence, would have been referred to thousands of years ago as a battle between the gods, right?
Yeah.
And which god will prevail. It's not just that, the gods were some like personification of like, what would you call it? It's not that the people back then would have always imagined these stories literally, but that it was well understood to be the battle of the gods that played out on Earth, and one of the gods will lose, and the other one will prevail, and that'll be the main god. You know?
Right.
Everyone's got to worship that god now.
And Wygraf is carrying the Ares Zodiac Stone. Mm-hmm. Isilud took the Virgo stone from the monastery, so he mentions he's carrying that stone. When you win that battle, Wygraf is now mortally wounded. It was kind of interesting. I really liked the way they represented this in the sprite animations and in the graphics.
Is this when he leaves and we go outside?
Right. So at first he's kind of doing the normal kind of kneeling down critical stage when you get into critical health mode and they all go onto their knee. He's kind of doing that, and he's like, okay, this isn't the end. We'll
zaps
battle
out,
again, and he zaps out. But when you go outside, he's like laying down flat
and there's
face,
blood,
and blood's just pulling around him.
Yeah.
And Isilud's like, oh my goodness, like what happened? You were jacked. And he's like, oh, just run away. Like, don't worry about me.
Yeah.
He's basically about to die. And so, mortally wounded, he resorts to using the Ares Arasite. And he speaks to one of these Lucavi, sort of like from some other plane or dimension or something. And it seems like these stones, when used by somebody with not good intentions, let's just say
that's the thing.
It acts as a conduit for these Lucavi to come into the world and possess that person.
So, what would you say to this? That line earlier on from Isilud, which is that the stones aren't demonic; they're the tools of the gods.
Yes,
something along those lines. Would I be correct in assuming that they potentially could be used for godly purposes?
Yes.
Okay, so he's not totally wrong when he says that.
That's what I loved about that.
Yeah, okay.
Is that from what we know from Ramza, they are completely evil tools or demonic tools. Yeah. And so when Isilud says that, it's like you just dismiss it because we've seen what they can do, right?
Right.
And that's what I love, not to get too far ahead of ourselves, but by the end of it, when Rafa uses it, it just brings her brother back
it's like,
to life.
Whoa, these
stones are not inherently evil.
Yes, they're powerful, but they're not inherently evil. It depends on who's using it.
Depends on the heart of the person using it.
Makes perfect sense.
So when the heart of somebody using it for bad intentions uses it, it acts as a conduit for those Lucavi to sort of like come in and possess that person. And that's what happens with Wygrif here. He gets possessed by Belius the Gigas. I was wondering if you liked this monster design better than the Chachulan or whatever.
Gosh, I can't remember because I fought
he's got the 4 arms,
a bunch of them now.
Maybe like some horns, kind of like, but he's got like 4 arms basically.
4, like Machamp.
Yeah. Yes.
Machamp, right? Yeah.
One of those Pokemon.
With horns. None of them made me laugh the way that the first one did.
Yeah.
They were all, the monster design is good in the game.
So anyways, Belias is like summoned through. Wygrif is obviously lost at that point. He's possessed.
Once that happens, you're done.
Now he's Belias, and so it's like, oh my gosh, we're gonna have to like go take him out. The stones have been taken away. It's kind of like the tables have really turned here a bit.
Yeah.
And I wanted to get your opinion on this because this is something that a couple of people in Discord have shared as a sentiment to how they feel about the story of the game. They felt disappointed by the fact that it starts off as this sort of more grounded political fantasy setting and starts to turn into more of
into
this
a
supernatural, fantastical sort of thing. And the story kind of starts leaning more into that in the latter half. I just wondered how you felt about that.
I mean, that's interesting. I didn't mind it at all. I mean, the story just went in a direction, which I was fine with. I have often in the past, I could say when I was a lot younger, I used to really want games to not do this kind of thing. I just wanted a super realistic kind of story. Those can work, but because it's a fantasy world, but it's playing out just medieval political intrigue, you know?
Yeah.
But without the supernatural element, I feel like there could be something missing within the story. Because like I've always wanted a Legend of Zelda without any magic or anything, and you kill people. And like Link to the Past, you kill people technically, soldiers. But there's always that supernatural. It's a weird thing. It's just as a kid, that's what I wanted. I was like, enough of this goblin, green blood stuff. It's like, give me the real violence, you know. But as I've gotten older, I'm not so concerned with that anymore.
Right.
I try to avoid the realism in media that I consume now more than anything. So I actually appreciate when stories kind of go in this direction. I think it's fine. I will say there are some games, and I don't know that I should give away the name, but there are some games where it has surprised me out of left field when they include something like aliens or a divine magic, evil magic kind of thing. But this game wasn't one of them. This game, I mean, with Final Fantasy, you kind of know what you're getting into. I would almost be suspicious if they made this Final Fantasy game without any crystals, or you already have like chemists and mages and stuff. Like maybe this is why. This is probably a good explanation for why I'm not concerned about this. When you start out a game with magic, my initial thinking is this is a game with divine powers in it. And a lot of places will say, oh, you can explain the magic without the divine, and that's fine, you technically can. But where does that magic come from? And there is some type of cosmology to this world, and that implicates some type of divine figure, generally speaking, if there is like magic, like supernatural. Supernatural is just that, supernatural.
Sure.
So if you've got the mages doing magic, I don't think this is a big deal. And you had the mages since the very beginning. So
yeah. One thing that you brought up there reminded me of a quote from C.S. Lewis, who I believe he was asked when he made this statement about the nature of his Narnia books and written for children or something like that, right?
Sure.
And his response was, when I became a man, I put away childish things, including the fear of childishness and the desire to be very grown up.
That's great.
It's a really good quote.
It sounds like funny worded, but it's true because nobody despises childhood more than a teenager.
Yeah.
Right? And it's like,
oh, I want to be grown up.
I don't like kid stuff.
That's kid stuff. That's stupid. I'm better than that now.
Yeah, that's why I wanted a Legend of Zelda where you kill people and it's very realistic and gross and morbid. That's exactly it. And as I get older, I'm like, no, the childishness is actually like, I welcome it. And it's a beautiful thing. There's a reason why fairy tales slowly become children's stories. They didn't start out that way.
Yeah.
They slowly became that way. And it's because like you may abandon this thing for a very long time, but ultimately there's some value in it. And it is to be reinvigorated by the youth, you know? And I don't know, there's something beautiful about it. So
yeah. I think that the transition from, I think it was like the E3 demo trailer for some possible GameCube Legend of Zelda.
Yeah, like 2001.
That looked really grown up and for the time, like realistic looking graphics, to Wind Waker and just how many people were just so upset by that, including me.
Me too. I was
at
like,
the time,
no, man.
because I want this to grow up with me. I was a teenager by that time, right?
Exactly, yep.
And so that's when, you know, I got so excited for like Twilight Princess when that was announced and the way that looked.
Yeah.
And now it's like no contest for me that Wind Waker's a much better game than Twilight Princess.
It's a better game and it looks better.
Not that Twilight Princess is a bad game. I like Twilight Princess a lot. But Wind Waker's a much better game.
Yes.
With a more timeless
it withstood the test of time.
that it can really stand up for a long time.
Like basically forever, yeah.
So anyways, I just noticed that about or just want to make that point about something you said there.
Perfect.
But I struggle a little bit, and I'm not saying this to, I'm saying this to get responses from people who feel this way about this sort of shift in the story's focus from political drama to supernatural, like save the world, typical Final Fantasy plot, right?
Sure, yeah.
That transition.
I do have an issue with that towards the end in Chapter 4.
Yeah.
But at this point in the game, I don't.
Yeah. So I'm saying this genuinely as like an olive branch. I'm like trying to reach out and understand people. I just don't get why that's a bad thing. Like I don't understand how this harms the story. If somebody can try to make an explanation of that to me, I would like to see that perspective, because I'm in order to debate or make a case against a position, I like to steel man that position as much as possible.
Sure, yeah.
I want the best possible argument from that side so that I can go, okay, let's consider all of that and let's examine that closer. And I can't do that currently because I can't grasp
It's beyond your
why
you're like Manway. You're like, I don't get where these evil people are coming from.
I can't understand a perspective in which, to me, makes sense why this is an inherently bad thing to happen in the story.
Yeah.
Like, why is it that it starts off with this sort of premise and then transitions into this one, a bad thing? And here's why. Because I would understand it if it was a contrived thing that Final Fantasy plots tend to do at the very freaking end.
Oh,
it's
like time compression?
Yeah, it's okay, you thought the story was this all the way up to now. Final Fantasy IX does this in a huge way.
9 does it like crazy worse than any game I've ever played.
Probably worse than any Final Fantasy game.
It's
Final
just
Fantasy
like
IX
unbelievable
does this.
what game you're playing by the end.
It's like, what the fetch happened, dude? What happened?
Okay, have you seen the episode of South Park where Cartman goes way too far into the future and they're just bouncing on bubbles and it's like everything's just blue bubbles and they're like, something got screwed up. And that's what FF9 is like for me. When you're at the end, you're just like, what is going on?
Now,
this is so beyond reality.
I say that as an enormous fan of Final Fantasy IX.
Me too. It might be my favorite one.
Game,
yeah, it's so
right?
good.
The ideas that they are bringing out at the end are not like out of bounds for the story.
Yeah.
The problem is that it's not set up that way.
No.
So when you get there and they just dump this new plot on you in enormous exposition walls of text, like they do in Chrono Cross and a lot of other games from that time, it's like, this feels contrived. This feels like a sudden switch in focus that doesn't align with what the story was doing up till now. If
some might say the original Full Metal Alchemist anime does a similar thing by the end.
Right.
Yeah.
So
it's just like, where did that come from?
If that's the position that people have as to why they feel Final Fantasy Tactics Switch is not good for the story, I don't agree. Because this is very slowly and purposefully contextualized all through Chapter 2.
Yeah.
Like, the entirety of Chapter 2 is this gradual unveiling of what's going on with the Lucavi and the stones and the Church of Glabados.
And it starts out with a legend slowly gets
They
built
don't
on.
take you into the end of the fourth act and be like, bam, actually the story is this.
Yeah.
Right? Like, it's not like that.
It's
It's before the midway point in the story. We're early in Chapter 2. We're meeting Cardinal de la Croix. Before that, we meet Mustadio, who has the Taurus stone. The Bert Company chasing after him. It's this slow, over many battles, transition of focus from this is what we thought was the real problem. It actually goes way deeper than that. There's this huge, terrifying, demonically driven conspiracy that is like way, 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 way worse than Larg and Goltanna's war. Like, Delita's going to go handle that stuff. We need to fight the real problem.
That's
here.
actually a good point, and that's part of, this is what I was going to bring up next. If you're looking for just the straight political intrigue, medieval times storyline that is contained within this game, that's Delita's story.
Yeah.
The issue with that, and I'm not going to say you can't tell a great story in that time period. You can. You absolutely can. And without any magic and any fun special things, right? But Delita's story is that of, I'm not dealing with the supernatural, I'm going to fix things based on the powers that be, right?
Yeah.
I'm going to rise to the top and become, the person who's like orchestrating
The revolutionary who...
Yeah, who rises up.
Yeah.
But, by the end of the game, we see how that works out for him. But it's not so glorious.
Yeah.
And it's not so... it's just a rough story.
Yeah.
It's a rough story to tell. Whereas with the inclusion of magic, you have the possibility of, within this gross, medieval, horrible situation, of having a beautiful story with a beautiful ending, which you can't get. Like, watch Game of Thrones. Anything. You can't get it just based on the political intrigue alone.
Yeah.
Now, of course, there's magic in that one too, I guess. But
yeah, there
as
are
far as the political
supernatural
intrigue goes,
elements
it's
in
like,
it.
hey,
Yeah.
look, there's a natural law to authoritarian governments, and for whatever reason, you can't escape it. This is how it is. And it could be, here's the prince that shows up, and everything's okay now. But that's as supernatural as this, I think, because that never happens.
Yeah. So that's my first point, is that this is set up and paid off in a very gradual, natural way, I feel. I don't feel like it's like something that's sudden or just like slaps you across the face and, well, this is a really big change of direction.
I never
this
felt
isn't
that.
really where I was working towards. It doesn't feel that way to me. That's my first point. My second point is, this is a Final Fantasy game. And Final Fantasy game, in order to be in line with the spirit of Final Fantasy, I think it needs to have some motif of the crystals in it.
Yeah.
And that's what the Aura site is. And most Final Fantasy games have some supernatural demon or power or something like that, whether it's Cloud of Darkness or the Four Fiends or from the original, or, I mean, like all of them have that element to it, right? And all of them sort of transition into that being a focus. And so to me, it feels very in line with the way the stories of the series are structured in that way. And so I'm not sure what people expected when they bought a Final Fantasy game, but this is exactly the sort of thing I would expect from it.
Yeah.
And I mean, I like that. It's one of the things I like about fantasy is the supernatural parts, which leads into my third point. I don't see how these are like inherently incompatible things. Why political intrigue or a grounded sort of like layer of the plot cannot be married with this supernatural layer that's underneath it. Why those two things are like somehow they don't go together. Incongruous, what is the word? Incongruous, whatever, I don't know.
Incongruent?
Incongruent with each other,
Yeah.
thank you. I don't understand why it's like, oh, this is like oil and water for some reason.
Yeah. Just as a kid, it was always, every story has magic. Why can't we get a freaking killer Legend of Zelda? Like that. It's a dark desire of the heart.
Yeah.
For people that just want to have their game. Like, I like Final Fantasy, but I also want it to tell a grown-up story. You know, like a story for a 35-year-old.
Yeah.
Can play it without all the fun magic fairy tales and stuff. I don't agree with that, but it's just what people want. People just seem to want that. Well, they think they want that. Because if they ever got a really dark Zelda without magic and where you kill people, I don't think it would be as good of a game. But hey, you know, anything's possible. But people think that they want a really dark, gritty, you know, kind of gross game that's very realistic.
Sure.
And I don't know that that's always the case, but, you know, some people, I don't know that if people got what they think they wanted, that they would still want it.
Yeah.
In the same way.
Sure. The last point I want to make on this is it actually comes from one of our patrons, Dude McGuy. And there's a couple, I'm just going to read his quote here, but there's a couple other things to this that kind of add to it that I agree with, that some other people were discussing too. So he says, Matsuno and his team at Quest do the same demonic possession story in the Ogre Battle games. The people in power turn to demons or evil in a desperate bid to keep their power. And some of those who are powerless resort to the same thing to try to overthrow their oppressors. So you see the powerful turning to like this endless sort of pursuit of power, ultimate power, and then those who are desperate to stop them turning to the same means to try to like beat them to it or whatever.
Right, of course.
I think the theme being explored is unearned power will corrupt anyone who is seeking power for power's sake. Sure. And you can kind of look at the Aura site or the Zodiac stones as like an analog of sorts for power, unearned power.
Sure.
The pursuit, the endless pursuit of power. And that power corrupts those whose hearts are after that power, because that's exactly what the Aura site does. Those with evil intentions are possessed by Lucavi. those with good intentions are not. So it's like a fantasy metaphor or analog for that sort of pursuit, blind pursuit of power. And I just struggle. I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm willing to hear. This is a book club, right? A video game book club,
right?
RPG book club, whatever you want to call it. I'm willing to hear the other side on this. It's just I'm struggling to understand why some people feel this is out of place for the story, or it doesn't feel right, or something like that. Because I have never gotten that sense from it. I feel like it is very, very well, brought in a gradual way that's natural and convincing and makes sense. So that's my perspective on that, but I'm hoping that will generate some discussion in the comments, and maybe we can look at that.
I think it will.
We can look at that and maybe bring it up in our last episode and bring up some comments. Also, if anybody, we'll do that, and this is what we usually do in our final episode. The next episode will be our last episode of Final Fantasy Tactics.
Yeah.
So we'll be looking through the comments. If you have any questions about the story or anything that you want to add to the discussion that we can look at and sort of bring up and talk about on the podcast next week, we'll have a whole segment at the end dedicated just to answering comments.
Well, and
so
we'll
prioritize the Patreon and Subscribe Star posts. So if you reach out to us there,
if they're relevant,
because I'll have a whole post on Patreon specifically for that. Do you have anything you'd like us to talk about or bring up in the final episode? That'll be going up really soon here. And of course, all the voting and things like that. So that's what we'll prioritize, but we will look at the comments as well. So just so you know, let me know what you think, and we'll bring up those perspectives in the final episode.
Perfect.
Okay, good stuff. So when Wygriff leaves as Bellius the Gigas, right? He's gone now.
Yeah.
Elder Simon, kind of with his dying breath, comes out and delivers the scriptures of Germonique into Ramza's hands, and admits the fact that he's been turning, a blind eye to the church's corruption. Mm-hmm. He's like, this was like his way of sort of repenting of that. Because the book of Germonique, or the scriptures of Germonique, contain a secret that the Church of Galapagos, about the origins of their Christ figure, who is Saint Ajora, that they do not want anyone to know. What's interesting to me is that they haven't just burned this book at this point. They just avoid the whole problem, but it has been kept, and now Ramza has it, and it contains a secret that the church does not want people to know. And so this is Simon's way of sort of repenting for turning a blind eye. He's like, get this out. Use this to turn the people against Galapagos, right? Kind of a thing. Leaving it in our hands to sort of take them down. So I'm going to pull up a link here. If you go into the menu, I can't remember the menu option for it, but it's like artifacts or something like that in the War of the Lions, and you go into there and you can read Ramza's notes or his thoughts about Simon's commentary. Because the book of Germonique, the scriptures of Germonique, are written in an older Evilesian language and script.
Yeah, the Ikoku language.
Yes, which Ramza cannot read.
No.
But Simon could, and Simon interprets and translates a lot of lines. And so Ramza is sort of going through and reading Simon's commentary on the scriptures of Germonique. And he gives a lot of thoughts that are really interesting and that bring up a whole nother rabbit hole of debate, aside from what we just did.
Well, I'm excited to jump into it.
But before we do that, there's another quick scene in Dorder where Ramza is approached by Marach. We learn his name is Marach later. And he sets up an exchange for Alma. He's like, if you bring us the scriptures of Germonique, then you can have your sister back, kind of a thing. We have her. She's going to die unless you give us the scriptures. So they're kind of at a stalemate here. They really want the scriptures back. He needs his sister back. So they're setting up a kind of exchange. At Riovanes is the castle. This is where the Duke of Barrington, the Grand Duke of Barrington, it's where he is at. And he's the one who sent Marach to do this. So, okay, so that's been set up. Our new destination is Riovanes. That's where Alma's been taken. We got to go rescue her. But Marach asks you in the midst of that, have you read the scriptures? Have you read what's in there?
Do you know what you're holding?
And you can have an option to say yes or no.
Oh, okay. I said no.
I said yes. So
he just laughs at you. He's just like, you're an idiot. You have no idea what you're holding.
I like that.
And he leaves, and you're just like, I don't know. But then you go into, there is some stuff that you can read. Right.
If you say yes, Ramza says something like, yes, and be assured if anything happens to my sister, the secret's going to get out.
Nice,
thing, right?
That's good,
so,
that's good.
Yeah, but I like that option of saying, no, I haven't read them, because a lot of kids probably didn't.
Oh, sure.
And it's like, I have no idea what's in there. You moron.
You idiot, yeah.
I like that.
So that would then prompt you to go in and like, oh, okay, maybe I should read this. That's a fun game mechanic, actually, to kind of get people to explore the story, but you don't have to. Right. You can keep playing the game, you don't have to.
So, okay, a little background before we read through this whole thing. Germonique was one of the disciples, the 13th disciple of Saint Ajora. Let's just get to the heart of it. This is lifted straight from the New Testament. Saint Ajora is basically Jesus Christ.
Right, which is hinted at well enough elsewhere. But
yes.
Yeah.
And Germonique is Judas. He's the one who sold Saint Ajora out to, I think there's a whole sect of the religion that sounds very similar to Pharisee.
Oh, nice.
In the Holy Jordan Empire.
Yeah.
Right.
Uden.
Yeah.
Uden is Jewish in German or something.
So it's quite obvious. It's not even. It's super obvious.
Yeah.
That this is going to be a sort of what do you call it? Recontextualization of the Christ story from the New Testament.
Yeah. In
a similar way that the Gnostics did for both Judas, because there's a whole book of Judas.
Yeah, the Gospel of Judas.
The Gospel of Judas in the Nag Hammadi library, right?
Yep.
Where it's like Judas was actually the one who knew the true nature of Jesus Christ as the monad.
The
right?
Gnosis, yeah. So Judas was initiated.
Yes.
Yep.
So there's that whole reinterpretation of that part of the story from the New Testament. But in the Old Testament story in the Garden of Eden, the Gnostics interpreted Jehovah as the demiurge, the material, corrupted, evil god-like figure of the material universe who trapped Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden and kept gnosis or knowledge from them. Right? Because he was jealous, because the light of the monad was in Adam, and he was tricked into breathing that light out of himself and into Adam. So Adam had an element of the higher realm and the monad that the demiurge no longer had. So he trapped them there and kept knowledge from them. And that's the whole thing with Gnostics. The word gnosis is a root word for knowledge. And so the serpent in this interpretation of the story, the serpent is being Satan in the original Old Testament, is Jesus, who comes to give knowledge, to give the tree of knowledge of good and evil, to give gnosis to Adam and Eve. This is obviously why the Christian Orthodoxy saw the Gnostics as heretics, because they are reinterpreting God as the devil and this sort of thing. It's blasphemy to them, right?
Yeah. Satan necessarily was not considered to be the snake necessarily until later on. Until probably around the time the Gnosis were like, hey, Jesus is the snake, and then the Catholics are like, no, Satan's the snake, and we're going to kill you. And then it became Satan's the snake, right?
Sure.
But it's not explicitly stated in Genesis that it was Satan or not, right?
Yeah.
So
right.
that probably gave the Gnostics some leeway, where they're like, hey, we can
interpret.
We
this
can do what
differently.
we want with this, and the Gnostics tended to do this. They tended to interpret in many different ways all of the little bits to be found within the Christian story.
Right.
Yeah.
So there is a very similar sort of Gnostic-like reinterpretation of the New Testament story of Christ and his 12 apostles going on here with Saint Ajora. I've had some debates with people in the past as to whether this is offensive or like inconsiderate or like just flat out dismissive or like harshly critical of Christianity, generally speaking, and of the faith of modern people, and whether or not this is out of bounds, so to speak.
Oh, I see.
And having given all the context I just did about the Gnostics and the fact that they sort of did the same thing, and they were branded as heretics by the Christian Orthodoxy, and it was blasphemy, and there was this whole like big deal made about it. There's a lot to talk about here, and it's going to take a little while to build the case, but there's a couple of things to keep in mind that add some nuance to this discussion. So I'm just reading from the wiki here, right, to give a background what the Scriptures of Germonique are. The Scriptures of Germonique, also known as the Germonique Scriptures, is a book from Final Fantasy Tactics. It is a biography of Saint Ajora Glabados, who is hailed by the corrupt Church of Glabados to be the child of the gods, when in fact he was an ordinary man. The book portrays Ajora as he truly was in his original life. It's not clear what Ajora's connection with the Lucavi is, based on what is in the Scriptures of Germonique, right? It's not clearly stated. Whether or not Ajora was a disguise used as a host for one of these demons, or whether Ajora's image or Ajora's body was possessed after his death is not clearly stated. So we don't know for a fact if Ajora was a Lucavi demon the whole time or not. That's something to keep in mind in all of this. We don't know that. All we do know is that from Germonique's perspective, the man who wrote this book, he was an ordinary man, not a child of the gods. So it's a reinterpretation. Jesus was not the Son of God sort of thing, right? Would be the analog there, I guess, or the metaphor. Let's just get straight into what Ramza's thoughts are on this.
Okay.
So this can be seen in the game, but this is kind of long. Hang in there with me. There's a lot of really interesting stuff to break down here. I opened the Scriptures of Germonique entrusted to me by Elder Simon, and began to leaf through the pages. The words before my eyes were writ in a holy script of the ancients. Several illustrations were scattered throughout, but many pages were missing or damaged, and the script was exceedingly difficult to decipher. I was deeply curious as to what knowledge lay within.
Is this where it says the ink was wet?
Yeah.
I did read this.
Okay,
I read
so you
this
have
whole
read
thing.
this thing?
I read this whole
Okay.
thing. I didn't realize that. Okay.
As I was turning pages, faintly penned letters in modern Evilisian script occasionally caught my eye. Notes of an explanatory nature had been added here and there throughout the book. I wondered who might have written them. Judging by the faded ink, some entries were more than a decade old, while others seemed to have been penned only in the last few days. As I touched my finger to them, the writing smeared. The ink had yet to fully dry. Every note was written by the same hand, Elder Simon's. I suddenly realized he must have devoted a significant portion of his life to deciphering these scriptures, line by painstaking line. This was probably, in a way, like the life work of Elder Simon, was trying to translate and interpret the Scriptures of Germonique. I relied heavily on his fragmentary notes as I continued reading. So another thing to keep in mind, many of the pages are damaged or missing, and he's relying on fragmentary notes of Simon to get the idea of what this text says.
Right, assuming that it's correctly translated and all
Exactly.
that. Yeah.
There's another thing to keep in mind in all this, right? Apparently the Holy Script had been recorded by Germonique, a disciple of Saint Ajora. Germonique, the name struck a familiar chord. Half-forgotten history lessons rose unbidden in my mind. So he would have grown up, like everybody else in Ivalice, a member of the Church of Glabados. It's the dominant religion of the kingdom, and would have been taught these things, I would assume, in a seminary-like class or something like that,
Yeah,
right?
sure.
The religion courses. And then I remembered, Germonique was the disciple who had betrayed his master, turning him over to the Holy Jordan Empire. I was astounded that a librum penned by the same Germonique for my history lessons now rested in my very hands. I could hardly contain myself as I turned the pages, and then I was assaulted by a shock far greater than the realization that I held a priceless historical artifact. Originally, I had thought the book to be no more than a collection of St. Ajora's teachings as recorded by Germonique. How unprepared I was to learn what it truly contained. The tome served as an account of St. Ajora's life. The St. Ajora described within was of a considerably different nature than the man about whom we have all been taught. I mean, I could see this in real life being someone reading the Gospels of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and then coming across the Gospel of Judas or something like that, and being like, what? This is not at all the Jesus they said here, or that I was taught growing up. Who wrote this? Who actually wrote this? Did Judas actually write this, right? You start to get into...
Which the Gospel of Judas was written around 300 AD.
Yeah.
Just so everyone knows.
Yeah, right.
It was written well after the point, yeah. So it wouldn't have been written by Judas. In fact, it's likely that none of Christ's apostles actually were very good at writing.
Yeah, and actually, yeah. Anyways. I had always known that St. Ajora was no ordinary mortal. My faith in the Church of Glabados was not as profoundly complete as that of my lord brother Zalbag. So apparently Zalbag is very devout. I guess I hadn't seen that in his character from the dialogue yet, but here, according to Ramza, he is. I thought that was interesting.
Okay.
Yet I did believe that St. Ajora was a child of the gods, descended from the heavens to deliver humanity from its self-inflicted chaos. Or should I say, I had believed. All I had thought immutable was shattered upon reading the scriptures. So he's pretty much taking this account and being like, I fully believe this one.
Yeah, I know. That's kind of a funny
Which
thing
is
to do.
Perhaps a mistake to make. You don't know if Germonique is lying or not. But the fact that the church has hidden it gives some credence to it. It's like they don't want people to think that this is real.
Yes.
And
I think the idea of this book comes from whatever you have in your head when you mention something like the vault beneath the Vatican.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And the fact that nobody knows everything that's down there makes your mind kind of speculate as to, they must be hiding something. What could they be hiding? There's a book that they're hiding that says that they're wrong or something, right?
Sure.
Like it's a creative person will take that and make something like this out of it.
Yeah. St. Ajora's birth came in the midst of a golden age of technology when airships yet plied the skies. He was born in Lazalia, in the city of Bervenia. Moments after his birth, he rose to his feet, so this is a freaking newborn infant, rose to his feet and approached a well. Upon reaching its base, words of prophecy poured forth from his infant lips. A calamity shall soon befall this well. Seal it up at once, that none may drink of it. So just know that this is, Ramza right now is accounting what he'd been taught about Ajora.
Okay,
this is not the Germonique version. He's recounting for the sake of his readers later on. This is what I always had been told about Ajora. So Ajora, as a barely born infant, speaks and says, seal up this well. People are going to die if they drink this water, right? Some days later, the Black Death visited the town of Bernevia. And all those who drank the well's tainted water succumbed to the plague and perished. Only those families who heeded the prophetic words of St. Ajora were spared from death and malady. After the incident with the well, the people came to revere St. Ajora as a portent of miracle and a child of the gods. But it was not until he reached the age of 20 that St. Ajora would become the savior of Ivalice and take his place among the gods in paradise. Ivalice was not always as united as it is today. See, that was it's kind of funny because he says that in the middle of a civil war.
Yeah.
But what he really means is all the provinces were different kingdoms
We're
at that
all
time.
separated, yeah.
Long ago, the realm was divided into 7 kingdoms. Fovoham, Lionel, Limbury, Lazalia, Galleon, Zeltania, and Mulund. So those are the different provinces of Ivalice now, right? Each warred with the others in a never-ending struggle to expand its own territory. The conflict had continued for centuries until an ambitious young king rose to power in Mulund. This young monarch dreamt of uniting all of Ivalice under his hand. But the road to victory was a difficult and dangerous one. The king turned to ancient tomes and to the dark magics found within, summoning a demon from the netherworld to do his bidding. But once unleashed, the demon slew the king and set out to destroy the very world itself. To combat this monstrosity, a great hero set out on a quest. Together with his 12 disciples, he collected the zodiac stones that had been scattered throughout the world, and the zodiac braves were born again. The zodiac braves soon defeated the creature's minions and banished the demon back to its infernal plane, for this becoming known as the saviors of our world. The story is now a well-known legend. The zodiac braves have since appeared whenever the world balanced on the brink of catastrophe, only to vanish just as quickly once the crisis had been averted. Similar catastrophe threatened the world in the time of Saint Ajora. The king of Limbury summoned a demon in hopes of seizing control of all of Ivalice, and once again plunged the world into chaos. And just as in the legend, Saint Ajora collected the 12 zodiac stones, and once again the zodiac braves rose to defeat the marauding demon. However, the sovereigns of any age have small tolerance for the interference of well-meaning heroes. Fearing the charismatic saint's growing influence, the Holy Jordan Empire dispatched soldiers to capture him and his devoted followers. Pharism was the prevalent religion in that day.
Pharism, nice.
Yes, which is clearly the Pharisees, right? And its priests feared Ajora's growing influence. Ultimately, Germonique, the 13th disciple, was tempted by sordid coin, offering vital information that led to his master's capture. This is clearly Judas.
Yeah.
Right. The saint was executed upon the gallows of Golgotha soon after.
That's like, if this all wasn't on point enough, that boom,
right there just nails it straight in.
Golgotha being
yes.
the place of the skull, the hill where Christ was crucified. Yeah.
Right.
That's
so
great. That's great.
It's not, there's no attempt here to hide that this is obviously some sort of metaphor, analog, whatever, to the New Testament Christ story. That's out of the way. That can't be debated at all. But lest we forget, Saint Ajora was a child of the gods. The wrath of the heavens was swift and terrible. Immediately following the execution, Mulund, the center of fairest teaching, was visited by a terrible cataclysm and sank into the sea. Saint Ajora then ascended to paradise to take his rightful place among the gods. This was the legend with which I was familiar, the very same tale told to every child of Ivalice. But the Saint Ajora described within the scriptures of Germonique was a different man altogether. Ajora was no child of the gods. He was a mere mortal, no more divine than you or I. He was a revolutionary who fought to realize his own ambitions. He was no lover of peace, no hero who would sacrifice himself for the good of humanity. Germonique wrote this of him. As the founder of a new religion with a rising number of followers, Ajora was seen as no more than a nuisance to the empire. But Ajora was apparently more than just a religious founder. He was a saboteur who infiltrated enemy states to collect information and sow disorder. Ajora was a spy dispatched to the Holy Jordan Empire by a rival state. Whatever he claimed to be, it was fact that the empire began to fear this upstart's growing influence. Germonique was employed to collect evidence that would allow the empire to arrest Ajora as a spy. The 13th disciple was in reality no more than the empire's instrument in a play to uncover Ajora's true intentions. It seems that Ajora indeed attempted to reassemble the Zodiac Braves. Germonique confirmed it in his writings that Ajora even discovered some of the stones, but what was his purpose in seeking them? I do not know if the young king of Limbury actually summoned a demon. At the very least, I have failed to encounter even a single line within the scriptures that records the event. Yet catastrophe did indeed befall Mulund at the time of Ajora's death. According to the scriptures, the bulk of the city sank into the sea. The footnotes provided further enlightenment. They expressed a different view, no doubt the personal opinion of Elder Simon. So the rest of this is directly like Simon's writings in the book. Although many spoke of their existence, none had ever set eyes upon these scriptures of Germonique. Some might say they are fraudulent, written with the sole purpose of discrediting Saint Ajora, but I know this tome to be authentic. I don't know how he knows that. I wish he would have explained that. That would have been interesting to read more about.
It just looks authentic.
When I served as an inquisitor for the church, many others in the Holy Office feared the existence of this work, and the same is no doubt true for the High Confessor. They were all fearful of these writings, for everything contained in them is fact. I mean, you could say they feared them. Like, I saw that fear. I saw the way they talked about it and everything. But how do you know it's fact, right? Like, how do you know that? After Saint Ajora's death, the church, which was capitalized on his considerable influence to seize power for itself. Sorry, let me read that again. After Saint Ajora's death, the church, which has capitalized on his considerable influence to seize power for itself, had only one task: to conceal his true nature as a human being. This one fact has to be erased from the annals of history. They needed to ensure that Saint Ajora be remembered as a child of the gods. Their use of the Zodiac Braves, a legend believed throughout Ivalice, was a stroke of genius. It was a simple feat to convince the people that Saint Ajora had led the Zodiac Braves to defeat a demon that never existed. I realize now that I had lost my faith the moment I began to read these scriptures, and yet I feel no sorrow. Thinking back, I now know that my desire to know the truth was stronger than my faith had ever been. But I have committed one great sin. I failed to condemn the church for lying to our flock all these years. And why? I knew that if I were to share this book with the world, my precious library would be taken from me. And to me, there could be no pain greater, for this library is the only means of slaking my endless thirst for knowledge. My curiosity eclipsed my will to do what was right. So that is the entry. Nice. Let me get some thoughts from you, because I've been talking forever.
Well, just reading that straight. No, it's clearly... so I want to talk a little bit to the broader idea that there would be some contentious issues with this, right?
Yeah.
Because I read this kind of thing, and I don't feel like it's very contentious. But there is a sensitivity, I think, that people have to their own culture, where they will read into things. Like, let's say people who are, like, if somebody is Native American. Like, let's take the book Twilight, for example. Actually, I like the book. I read the book. It's actually a good book. I think it's pretty well written. It's a good book. I don't mind Twilight at all. And it helps me learn languages because it's translated into a ton of different languages. But I read it in Spanish. And at least the Spanish translation, I've got no qualms with it. But Stephanie Meyer decides to tell a story about the Quileute. I think that's how you pronounce it. I've never said that word out loud. The Quileute Native American tribe in northeastern Wisconsin, or Washington. And she kind of she takes some general mythology that may be more or less correct according to the actual tradition, but she kind of inserts things in it and was like, ooh, what if the skinwalkers were werewolves, or however that goes. I don't know anything about Quileute mythology. But how does somebody who is part of that tradition, who is a Native American of Eastern Washington, and hears someone not of their culture reinterpret their story and tell it back to them by changing things and messing with things, and then delivering it and giving it to them, they're going to feel like offended, right? They're going to be like, that's not what our thing is, and this is weird, and you got this wrong, and that's just stupid, and why would you even mention this, and this is irrelevant, and where'd you get this stuff from? Like, this is totally wrong, right? And to, there is, I don't know that it's huge, but there is at least a small amount of backlash to Stephanie Meyer's book, in including that, group of people, because it was offensive. Well, it's not very often that the Western white Christians get a taste
of their own medicine.
You took the words out of my mouth. It's not very often that we are exposed to someone else from Japan or anywhere else reinterpreting our story in a kind of interesting and unique way, like this, and us being like, "What? You can't do that! I'm up in arms. That's wrong." And it's like that's what I feel like, at least to some degree. And some people may disagree with that analysis, and that's fine. Different people will have different reasons for why they don't like this. But I feel like there would be some innate knee-jerk reaction to this is the culture I grew up in, and they're clearly taking my culture and twisting it to fit some fantasy narrative, and I don't know how I feel about that. Like that's how most people would their internal dialogue would say something like, I don't know how I feel about that. But when you're in Japan, and there have been lots of books written about the Japanese from the perspective of America or England or Portugal or wherever, and then the Japanese people thinking, they got our story wrong, right? And I don't know how I feel about them taking our beliefs and twisting it like that. I don't know how I feel about that.
A lot, or some of the bulk of the criticism. There wasn't like a ton of criticism for Shogun, but when I read Shogun, that
to some degree,
some of that was
the people in Japan.
This white man taking the story and like interpreting it in a way that is not like accurate to how we feel about our own culture, right?
And is that to say that white people can never write books about Japan? No, it's just that there's going to be pushback, and people are going to say, yeah, I don't know about that. You got that wrong.
It's important to consider his perspective may lack some of the nuance of not having been raised in that culture.
Up in it. Exactly.
And you should know that.
But at the same time, you can get some level of an outsider's perspective into a thing, right? Like there is still some value there. It's just don't take it as gospel, right? Because it was written by an outsider. So when we, as it relates to this story, we've got an artist in Japan reading the Christian tradition as well as apparently some critiques of it, and saying, hey, this fits a story that I'm doing. This would be kind of cool, you know? And he does it. And it's not, I guess what I'm trying to say is it's not that big of a deal. It really isn't. It's an artist taking a thing and saying, ooh, what if we did this to it and then threw it into my fantasy world? And that way people would realize that it's similar but not the same. And it's cool art. It's an interesting story. It'll get people to think. It's a way of like presenting like a general philosophy. And it's not like he's saying this is true. He's not saying Jesus was a man. He's just like throwing this idea out there that's just like, hey, let's play with what if Jesus was a man? The same way that we're like, hey, what if the Shinigami were like the actual Satan devils? Or what if I'm going to tell a story about Amaterasu and how he's like this great early god of Japanese folklore, and I'm going to twist his story to kind of make it interesting, and hey, isn't that cool? It's not really that different. So I feel like that's what he's doing here. And as an artist, artists just tend to do that. They tend to take things in their world and reshape them and represent them in an interesting way. It doesn't mean, hey, you're wrong, hey, I'm right. It's like, hey, isn't this interesting? And it is. To his credit, it is very interesting to retake some element of culture and put it in a different way so that people see it in a different light. But it doesn't mean that you're saying anything. You're not casting a judgment. You're not telling anyone they're wrong. You're just representing something. Represent, that's what the word represent means, and that's what art is. It's representations of things. In this case, he took a little bit of some Western European culture and represented it in a different way within his game. And that may make you feel uncomfortable, but it's what artists do, and it's what Western Europeans have done to other cultures many times. And so maybe just don't avoid that knee-jerk reaction of like I'm offended or anything like that, because I don't think it's a big deal, and I don't think it's what he wanted to do. And Japanese people find Western culture fascinating. They find it so fascinating. You watch anime and things, and they're constantly putting in these Western culture ideas and philosophies and religion stuff, and it's just like they find it fascinating, and they're kind of trying to make sense of it and represent it in ways that they can understand better. And you know, this is just part of that.
That's all Xenogears was. Was Takahashi taking Western philosophy and psychoanalysis and
religion
and sort of trying to represent that in this sort of mythology that he sort of like manipulated the details.
He injected some things in.
Put some of himself into it. Represented it as a different thing. as a fictional different thing.
And every different culture that has a stake in what Takahashi represented, or Mitsuda, or anybody, in what has been represented, you can pick that thing apart. You can take the artist's representation, and everyone, the people from this place can take it apart here, the Christians can take it here, the maybe people from Australia don't like it, maybe some of the Jewish people didn't like some of it, maybe some people in Europe. There's all people all over the place. You can take apart all the things that were represented within this work of art, but I think you would do a better service to yourself, and it'd be a little more valuable to take a step back and appreciate the art for what it is, as opposed to everyone stepping in and taking it out till you're left with a perfectly unoffensive piece of art, which I don't think exists.
No such thing.
It's it's not art.
How boring is that?
Because that's art confined to a very small border of what's allowed, and it's like artists don't do that.
And it's
artists step out of bounds, and you might not like. Exactly.
It doesn't meant evoke, to be provocative.
It doesn't provoke emotions. It doesn't evoke emotions, I guess. It doesn't do anything. It's not even art at that point. It's just a thing that's bland and boring that no one's offended by and that everyone can just walk by and not care about. I don't know if I'm going to get pushed back for saying that or not. I'm open to maybe that being wrong. I just kind of thought of it. But I think there's some value to that. I think that's
there's at least
probably...
If it's not... I think that you can be provocative without the idea of necessarily writing something that's for sure going to like offend people or be edgy or something.
Right.
But rather just to get people to think about something that they take for granted in a different light, to challenge what they think about it. And sometimes that will lead to being people being offended. Well, but that may not be like a malicious purpose of the art.
And that's what matters, right? I think that's what matters.
Yes.
Is what was the intent? Was it malicious, or are Japanese people just fascinated by Western culture and they're using it to build their own stories?
Right.
Is that malicious? No. But a funny thing about representation, this is just the general idea. Like representation is just that, representation, right? And so a representation is like a metaphor. Like if I'm trying to explain a concept and you're not getting it, I might use a metaphor, but I'll take it's like a rock, and the rock's kind of hard, but it like can break, and now you have two rocks, right? But it was one rock, now it's two rocks. Did you add? No, it's still the same mass, but it's two things now.
Yeah.
Well, I'm using a rock as a metaphor to explain a concept, right? But I'm representing the concept. I'm saying, take what I have and take your idea of this thing I'm explaining to you and project it onto this rock. Now pretend the rock is the thing. And some people are going to say, they'll point out the differences. And they'll say, but that rock's not the thing, that's just a rock. The thing is something else. But 90% of people will say, that's close enough. Yeah. I'm willing to abide by this. That's close enough. I'm not offended by your representation, and I'll accept this metaphor to see where you're going with it, right? But some people will just look at that and say, what? Faith isn't like a seed. It's that seeds are things you put in the ground. I'm offended, but it's like, no. A metaphor is a representation, and to some degree, it's art in that sense too. But the representation, because you can't always just present things. You always have to represent.
Yeah.
You can't present fact because people just don't see the same way. Yeah. You have to say, well, it's like this, and then you have to do a representation into a metaphor in some way. That's kind of just how our brains work, right? Because we don't see the objective world the way we think we do. And so sometimes in order to get someone to see your point, you have to do that. But a lot of times when you show the metaphor, people won't accept it. And that's what I mean when I say being offended or not, right?
Yeah.
If art is offensive, all art has to be offensive in some way to someone.
Yes.
That's more or less what I mean. All art is a representation that some people will look at and not accept as proper.
The metaphor.
Say, this metaphor is not right. A building isn't like a cake. They're too different. Buildings and cakes are too different. They're way too different. I don't accept the metaphor, right? Yeah. And so that's going to happen to some percentage of people. And now if you're really good and speak to a really broad audience, you can get 99% of people to buy into your metaphor, right?
Yeah.
But there will always be people who are like, I just can't follow you there and I don't like it. and I don't agree with you. I don't think you represented it properly with your metaphor. And often they have a point, and that's fine. You can go to Mitsuda and say, Senajor's not...
Matsuno, by the way.
Sorry, Matsuno. Oh, Mitsuda is the musician. Okay.
The music.
Some people could go up to Matsuno and say, you know, Saint Ajor and Jesus have some very distinct differences in your representation. I just want to talk to you about that.
Yeah.
And he'll be like, I know, I know, dude. Like, I'm just telling a story, you know.
Yeah.
And you can bring it up to him, but that's the response that you'll get, and along with most people. And I think the issue is, in this case, if a lot of people took issue with Matsuno's metaphor, that would mean that his metaphor didn't have the solidest footing, but it is still a metaphor in the end, right? So if only 50% of the people look at your metaphor and say, I'll keep playing the game, or how many people look at it and say, I'm done with your game now because that metaphor didn't work and it hurt my mind, right? And that's probably not a great representation for everybody listening either. But I feel like that will be the issue. And when it's like 50-50, it's like, okay, maybe the metaphor needed a little bit of work, right? Yeah. But that I don't think you can apply malicious intent based on your rejectance of a metaphor. There you go.
I think that is exceptionally well put. And it is more or less the crux of my argument in those debates that I had.
Yeah.
And it led into this. I find it incredibly presumptuous to the point of being offensive to apply the intent of the artist for them by saying this is hateful, like dismissive rhetoric that is, it's like persecuting Christians or something like that. It's hateful to Christians. It is like some sort of like spit in the face to them that their belief, that their faith is like obviously wrong or something. Mm-hmm. How do you know that that's the intent?
Right.
To me it seems obvious that the artist's intent is just to take a real life thing, change it to fit a story he's writing, and use it as a basis.
Which is what everyone
does. Which
does.
doesn't necessarily mean they're trying to say something about the real world thing.
Right, it was just an element.
Where are you getting that from?
Well, and even if he is,
so what?
He's not Christian.
So what?
He's not a Christian, right? So of course he doesn't believe Jesus was the Son of God. Otherwise, he'd be a Christian.
Yes.
He's not a Christian. Not everyone has to be a Christian.
Exactly.
It's okay for people to not be Christian and to look at that story and say, oh, here's a story about a dude who went around and caused an uprising or whatever. And it's like, okay, that of course that's how he sees it, because he's not a Christian.
Yes.
And it's okay. It's okay.
Yes.
It's okay. If he accepted Jesus as the Son of God, he would be a Christian. And Japanese people, like I think 2% of people in Japan are Christian. It's very, very low.
Right.
If you're playing Japanese games, don't expect
that they're
Christians who made you games.
Christian mythology.
And that they're going to accept it as in their representation, right? They're going to represent it in their own way, which is not a Christian perspective.
Based on their historical experience with foreigners coming in with their religions.
Yes.
And the way that all went down. And we're not going to do a whole diatribe on the history of Japan with religion. But
because there's stuff both ways on that.
It was some bad things happened both ways on that one.
Both ways.
That's not the point of this. The point is, first of all, it's presumptuous to say that is his intent.
That was the intent,
I can see why you might read it that way. But if you're going to ascribe that intent to him, you need something more solid than just, look at the story, it's obvious that it's hateful.
It's obviously
Go
Jesus.
Find me an article or an interview where he says, I hate Christians and that's why I put this in the story, and I'll believe you.
Yes.
I have not had anyone been able to show me that yet.
Right.
So if you can show me that, I will start to give more credence to the idea that it could be offensive. I don't think it is. I don't think that was his intention. Even if it was, I would not be personally offended by it as a Christian, because my next point is, I grew up, we mentioned this earlier in the podcast, reading Scripture, Christian,
James,
believing in that. I don't know how personal I want to get on this, but there's an element to this that another reason why I find this story not to be like offensive or blasphemous or something like that. It's because I had a similar experience where I read material that I believed or felt was hidden from me by people who I trusted or believed were telling me the truth. And that recontextualization of the story I grew up hearing changed my conclusions about what I believed. Now, the interesting part about that, and the other side of the coin on this, is that I was purposefully getting this information from sources in the church. I was not trying to read those who were looking to discredit the church. I was reading from those who were sharing this information, historians of the church, who still were faithful members of it.
Right.
So their conclusions of this information and their commentary on it in the book that they wrote that I was reading was clearly different from mine. So it's not like my conclusion is the only one to come to. But I had a similar experience to what Ramza is experiencing here. And so I relate to that experience of you're feeling like the whole context of what you believe is flipped entirely. And it's like, how do I reconcile this? And I spent pretty close to a decade in prayer and study trying to reconcile that and came to the conclusions that I did, and I'm at peace with that now. So there's a whole element of that in the story of Final Fantasy Tactics that speaks to me and that I think is important to think about. It's something that the artist is like putting in here, and you consider that and you think about it, and it can solidify your positions one way or the other, depending on how you choose to think and study to discuss that, right? The world is not black and white like this. So I grew up in partly for 4 years in like elementary school age in Denver, Colorado. There's only one other place I've ever lived outside of Denver. It's kind of interesting the way that like certain cities you've lived in, like the culture that develops around them. It may be a little different now, but at the time that I lived in both Las Vegas and in Denver, there was like really, really strong evangelical roots there.
Yeah.
Like really strong. A lot of people were religious, were Christian, and were particularly like non-denominational evangelical Christians. It's like there were tons of churches. There are churches everywhere.
Yeah.
Every freaking corner you turn is another freaking church, which was not my experience in other places I've lived. Well, here it's predominantly Mormon, of course, in Utah. But,
in Utah, yeah.
Other places I've lived, it's not quite the same in terms of like the presence of strong evangelical presence.
Yeah.
So we had neighbors across the street when I lived there who were really devout evangelicals. And the kids who were our friends were so concerned about blasphemy. I mean, to a level that I always was like, I had a hard time understanding as a child.
Or they wouldn't like read Harry Potter.
No, that's exactly right.
Yeah.
And if we were out with other friends playing like a game, imaginary game of like wizards and knights and swords and sorcery, which we would do sometimes. We
That's
went
like
to
Disney level stuff.
Yeah.
But I get you.
We went to
dismissive.
like the Renaissance Festival and got wooden swords and shields and armor and capes and staves, and we were out there either doing like, it probably wasn't Lord of the Rings because Lord of the Rings wasn't out yet.
The movies,
because that wasn't until we moved to Phoenix where
but
that really
still,
became
just
popular.
like Snow White or like where you're battling dragons and
yeah, and I
sorcerers
believe
stuff,
in particular
like,
Harry Potter,
no.
the books were out.
Sleeping Beauty is what I'm thinking of.
Yeah. Anyways, we were out there doing that
the
kind
books.
of game, and they were not allowed to play with us in this game because of this fear of witchcraft and just this like just strict
I knew people like that in Denver, too,
avoidance of anything resembling witchcraft or devilry or anything like that. Even just children playing a game, and I was so dumbfounded by this, and like they came with sidewalk chalk. Because they were outside as we were playing, but they felt excluded by us because we wouldn't stop playing our game to allow them to play with us.
Yeah.
And they were using sidewalk chalk to draw crying faces in my driveway, like asking us to repent and like, please don't do this. Your souls,
How
like
old?
kind of a thing. Probably like
10 or
8 or 10 years old or something like that.
okay, yeah.
Okay, so there is a certain level that I feel people are sensitive to that to me, and I don't say this to try to offend anybody, but just my observation or my perspective on it. It shows a real lack of confidence in what you believe.
Oh,
if
sure.
you are
The
incapable
exposure,
of grappling with any exposure to it. Because to me, that's more like the parents, like so afraid their children will be taken away or deceived, or like they can't handle it. It's like, really that leads me to believe that there's like this real lack of strong confidence in what they really believe. They don't really believe it as strongly as they think they do. Because if you were truly confident in what you believed, you'd be able to look at anything and see, there's the faults here and here and whatever, and like I'm solid.
But
I'm
you
good.
take it as a whole.
I'm not offended by this because I know that it's not real or it's not true or whatever, right? And so, to me, there's a certain sense that I wonder if people who are super offended by this and fear it as blasphemy or whatever, why do you struggle to look at this and be like, it's a fantasy story, and even if it is hateful, whatever, I'm convicted in what I believe, and it doesn't bother me.
Right.
That's kind of how I was, like, growing up. It was like, I heard a lot of rhetoric that was against my religion growing up all the time. And it never offended me or bothered me, because I was just so convinced in what I believed. And so I'd listen to it. My friends would talk to me, I'd talk to them. They would say all kinds of nasty things about what I believed, and it's like, actually, no, we don't believe that, and this is this, and I'd be able to discuss it, and I wasn't like offended by it. So, I don't know. We probably can't spend forever talking about this.
I feel like we've done a good, but there is one other side to it I wanted to touch on.
Okay, go for it.
The other side is from an artistic perspective. So we've gone on a lot about the, if you don't like this because it offends your sensibilities as a Christian or a Christian descended Westerner, whatever. Okay, fine. We've done a pretty good job of addressing that, and I'm not saying we're right, you're wrong. I'm just saying that we've talked about it, and if you have any other thoughts, then throw them at us. If you feel like we've misrepresented, or if our metaphor misrepresented your idea and you want to pick that the way that, fair enough, go ahead. But I think we can talk about the artistic merits of being so overt in your analogies of things, right?
Which is purely what Xenogears was. Like, the whole game was that.
It was like so overt. With this, where it's like really the Pharism, you couldn't have come up with a more creative, really Golgada, or what's it called?
Golgada, I think.
Golgada. You couldn't have like been a little bit more nuanced, or what's the word?
Tried to separate it a little more from the source.
You could have been a little less like didactic and straight about exactly what you're addressing. Hey guys, this is Jesus. Like
on the nose, yeah.
Oh, yeah, it's too on the nose. It's a little too on the nose. And from an artistic perspective, sometimes analogies that are so blatantly lifted from reality and are not so much creatively metaphorized, creatively represented in a creative enough way, you can criticize the creativity there.
Yeah, you could say,
and maybe
it feels
some
a little
people,
lazy, or
where it's like, couldn't you have come up with something that maybe loosely resembled Christ, like with the Matrix, Neo. He's Jesus.
Yeah.
Like, that is a Christian story. That whole movie is a Christian story. Most people probably don't know that, right? And people who went to church every Sunday may not realize that Neo is a Christ figure in a story.
Yeah.
Same thing with Harry Potter. Like Harry Potter or Star Wars, like that is a Christian story. But a lot of people may go to church and see these, well, not the new Star Wars, I guess, but generally speaking, the original trilogy. A lot of people will go and watch these and not realize, but that's because the artistic value of the reinterpretation would be higher, in my opinion.
It's like
right?
the lines are blurred enough to where it's not an on-the-nose
It's not so on the nose.
Yeah.
That's more, people would have a greater appreciation for the metaphor from an artistic perspective if it did something more along those lines. Now, the issue with this game, it's targeting 15-year-olds. Like, it's difficult to not be on the nose and still get a general type of like idea across, right? Like you want to be a little bit more direct in your metaphor if you're going for a younger audience, right? But Harry Potter didn't quite do that. In some ways, it was purposely concealed. But J.K. Rowling's come out and said specifically, the Christian story is influenced Harry Potter like greatly and clear, obviously. I mean, we don't need to go into spoilers, but it's pretty obvious. but I feel like there's some artistic criticism to be had there. It maybe could have been a little bit more hidden, a little more veiled. That may not have appeased the hardcore Christian people who are offended by it, but at the very least, it would feel better to me, where I wouldn't laugh while I'm reading it.
Yeah.
Where I wouldn't be like, this is Jesus. Like, that criticism, I think, is probably a little more warranted. What would the word be? It's a little more astute, a little more...
Yeah. It's like you...
Correct, that I can say, yeah, I can see that.
Maybe he opened himself up a little bit.
Yeah.
To a little bit of backlash on this because he just made it too similar.
Yeah.
Right? Sure.
That criticism is warranted, I think. It's warranted if that's what you want to criticize.
Anyways, I'm sure that's going to open a can of worms in the comments.
Oh, it certainly is.
And there will probably be a lot of things to respond to next week.
I tend to do this. I tend to overbroaden what I talk about. I don't mean to offend anybody. I don't mean to say that nobody ever has a right or has a reason to take offense to things.
Yeah.
I don't want to say that.
Just don't.
I'm just trying to offer a different perspective.
Try.
That's all I'm doing.
Just don't try to. Don't look for ways.
Don't look to be offended. That would be a good just rule of thumb for life.
Don't presume people's intentions.
Rule of thumb. Some people are offended if you say rule of thumb.
Yeah.
Because well, I just said it, and sorry, but I didn't think it was offensive till afterwards. But I said it, and if you're offended, I'm sorry. But rule of thumb is a good metaphor. And if you criticize my metaphor, that's fine. But just know that you might be being a little more picky than is warranted. But I'm open to being wrong about this stuff too. Like we read the comments here, and I'm going to, pay attention to what you guys say too. If you think that I'm wrong about whatever I said, and I said a lot of stuff, and some of it probably is wrong. So let's move on.
You can't avoid it. It's like in an unscripted, free-flowing podcast.
Several hours.
You're going to say something or many things along the way.
Right, it's almost not worth bringing up. But to some degree, when you're talking about people being offended and saying get over it, like I do want to let people know I care about you. I care about you. I really do. And I don't want you to be offended. And, my apologies if I did.
We do our best to try to be nuanced and to understand multiple perspectives. And I used to say this all the time. It actually came up because someone commented on our, what he saw as flawed view of history, right? As if we were saying all of history is like made up or subject to interpretation.
Oh, I did say something like that, didn't I?
And it's like, it reminded me of when I used to say hashtag not all the time. It's like...
You have to put that on everything you say.
I'm not trying to say literally all of history cannot be trusted and it's all conspiratorial, made up bullcrap by the victors. Like, that's not what I believe. I obviously don't believe that.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, when I saw that the story's framework was history was wrong on this account, in this particular instance with this particular character, it makes me wonder how many such examples exist in real history. Not, it puts the entire history of the earth as we know it in question to me. Right? All
of it's wrong.
That's not what I'm trying to say.
The thing would be, well, which parts are wrong and which parts are right, and you just your faith in that gets
I'm just wondering on a general scale about that. I am not trying to claim all of it's bogus.
You know what's funny? Right? This is something that we do, and I'll speak for myself. Well, I am a perspective person. If I say things, I'm not always asserting a factual statement.
Yes.
I'm often saying, here's a different way of looking at it. There's a different perspective here. So I can sharpen a perspective, I can enforce a perspective or something like that, and that's often what I'm doing and what I'm looking for. I tend not to argue to change people's minds. I don't care. I either want to sharpen my own perspective or I want to offer somebody else a new perspective. I don't actually want, because I don't know if I'm right or not most of the time. Most of the time.
Yeah.
I'm like, I don't know what the facts are, but here's a different way of looking at it. Here's a perspective on it, and it may be valuable or not. And I feel like some people in the comments, based on, because I don't say this all the time, based on some things that we say, think that I'm just like spitting alternate facts. Or, just saying, here, this is a fact and this is how it is. No, this is a way of looking at a possible fact. and that's what I'm saying, right? That's what I'm saying. It's a perspective thing. And I think there's value in having a sharper perspective.
Yeah. sometimes maybe we could be a little clearer as to...
Like every time.
This is not the belief I personally espouse.
Right.
It is simply a perspective that is interesting for this conversation. Because there have been a couple times when people, get upset. It's like they start to think they know what we believe about broader politics or something
based
like
on
that,
our
based on what
offering a
we've
different
said in this
perspective.
podcast. And it's like, actually, I don't believe any of them.
It's so funny because whenever I see comments like that, I'm always like, based on what we've said, you all have no idea what either of us think about, well, almost anything other than video games, right?
Yeah.
But about the greater political, historical world. You guys don't really know what we actually think, but you will hear different perspectives, and both of us have kind of a sympathy for different perspectives, right?
Yeah.
And we will both often, like I'm a devil's advocate kind of person, I will often just argue the opposite side just because it sharpens my own perspective.
Yeah.
Right? And that's just a thing. It's valuable. Get
I
good
think it
perspective on things, and
It's dialogue,
valuable.
man. Dialogue is the whole purpose of what we're doing.
exactly.
Okay, enough of that. It's time to
Okay.
move on to this next scene with Delita and Ovelia, which was freaking awesome. And if you have not seen the War of the Lions version, I'm going to show it to
I
you.
have not, so
It's
please do.
fantastic.
Please do.
The scene is fantastic.
I do hope this day finds your Royal Highness in better spirits than those past.
Do not mock me. Please. I could not bear it.
That was cruel of me. I am sorry.
I played my part. Yet still Evilise runs red with blood. For what?
I will burn down this kingdom, and from its ashes build for you a new one, a kingdom worthy of you. I will show you a world where your light will outshine the sun, a world that will know no darkness. Dry your tears.
Very nice.
It's a fantastic scene.
That's a very good scene. So I had the privilege of reading that scene, and it plays out much in a similar manner. It just, even the hug, even when she hugs
embraces
him, it's
at the end.
unexpected, and it just kind of happens.
Yeah.
It was powerful in the PS1 version, but that was beautiful.
It's really, really well done. And there's a lot to break down in this, like a lot. So one thing I want to bring up first is that some of the people who were watching with me when I was doing my streams of this, they were like, this seems to be a really sudden change for Delita, right? Like, they were not sure whether they found the scene convincing because his whole like personality and tone with her really changes very abruptly here.
Yes.
And so I want to dive into that a little bit, as well as into Ovelia and kind of her character arc over the course of the story. Also realize that this is not done being developed yet. There are developments on this that lead all the way up to literally the very end of the game.
Like after the credits.
Yes.
Yes.
Like Delita and Ovelia,
Yeah.
we're not done with this yet. It's still building. And Delita, let's just say, without spoiling too much, he may come off as being entirely sincere in the scene. But let's just say that his ambitions and his goals are not, they're kind of, they've transcended anything to do with people at this point. He's all about an ideal of reforming this government by whatever means necessary.
Right.
There's a term for this called consequentialism, which means the ends justify the means.
Yes.
It's the embodiment of that philosophy. He's willing to use other people as he was used to reach his ends. And Ovelia is not excluded in this. Let's just put it that way. So up to this point, Ovelia has been a very unwilling hostage of his that he's having to drag around the kingdom with him everywhere he goes, who is crying and upset and unable to like reconcile her own identity and just really struggling all the time. And his response up until now has been cold and harsh and get over yourself, take my hand and live, or be hunted by the Hokoten Knights. You know, like, it is what it is. Like, stop pouting about it and just like get on with it. That approach has not worked.
No.
And
no, she's too feisty.
Delita, as determined, as much as he has changed as a character from when we knew him in the first chapter, I feel like there's a tinge of his heart, the last remaining part of it that is soft, was touched in the scene when he is mocking her by using her title as a princess. Oh, your royal highness, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah, and after she had been revealed that she's not.
That moment in this cutscene, the voice acting is spectacular from
it's very
her.
good.
Do not mock me. It was really powerful.
Yep.
And it struck him how cruel he was being. And he admits to that and apologizes. This is the first time I feel like he has sort of looked inward and been like, I think I may be going a little too far here.
Yeah.
And so he tries to soften up a bit and be a little more sympathetic to her. But in turn, what this does in the scene overall is gets her to now willingly follow him. So it makes his job easier in regards to her. So that's one part of this. The other part of it that I find really interesting is just like the fact that they're giving this screen time to her. And like there was the added scene that we talked about that's not in the PS1 version, where they're back at the falls again, right? So now we've had, if you're playing the War of the Lions version, you've had several scenes now of her really trying to deal with this. And I'm able to imagine, just anybody. What if, like, you were, I don't know, captured or something, and you're like, what's going on? You were, like, kidnapped, and some guys are coming down in a basement somewhere, and they're talking about how you aren't your parents' child, and your whole life, you're not actually Case and Sperry, you're not actually Mike Brown or whatever. That's not who you are. You were planted. You were like exchanged at the hospital or something like that, right?
Yeah, that's
and it's like you don't
world breaking.
And this was done on purpose to like manipulate things. Your whole like identity. You have no idea who you are. Like that would be such a horrifying thing to try to grapple with, and in particular with how she in the scene is talking about. I played this part. I went to the monasteries and had all this solitude. And like suffering that I went through, but I did it to play a role to maintain peace and Ivalice. And yet, despite me doing that, look at what's happening now. It's for nothing. My whole life, my whole purpose in life has been for nothing, and I'm not even who I thought I was.
Yep.
Like,
and now she's like a prisoner.
What a horrible fate.
Going place to place, yeah.
What a horrible fate to be used like that, to be dragged around so that other people around you can like ascend and gain more power. And you're not even a princess to begin with. Like it's something I can really sympathize with. And for the first time, Delita is showing some sympathy to that, and she really needed it. She just needed to be heard and understood, and she finally gets that across. And he starts to reveal a little bit of what he's really after here. He's not working for the church. He's not working for the dukes. He's not working. He's
doing his
ready
own
to
thing.
Burn the whole thing down and start it over again. And I'm going to do it for you, he says.
Yep.
I'm going to do it for you, to build a kingdom worthy of you and make this better for you, and so I can help you. I'm emphasizing that. It might be a bit on the nose, but I'm just saying.
Yeah.
Some people were wondering, why is Delita acting so differently?
Yeah.
I believe his motive is to make his job easier in regards to dragging her around. But he is fully dedicated to a higher goal than he's not necessarily concerned about people.
Yeah.
Maybe people on the broader kingdom's
humanity
scope.
He's concerned
but
about,
not on like certain individuals he has to deal with along the way.
There's a great quote. Is it Woody Allen who said, "I love humanity. It's the people I don't like."
Yes.
I don't know who said that quote. But that's Delita right there. He's like, I'm helping the world, but I don't like any part of it, just the whole thing. You know?
Yeah, exactly.
That means his idea of the whole thing. So you're right, it's the ideal that he's kind of, and he feels like he can bring it about.
He is dedicated to an ideal to such a degree that he's willing to go to any length and any ends justify that means.
Which is how every authoritarian government gets started, and also how they all end.
Pretty much.
And how government has gone for the past like 10,000 years. So I have some thoughts there. That scene, I didn't get it what you had said, but I had never beaten the game before when I had played that particular cutscene.
Oh, sure, yeah.
Not to say that I even still at this point, I have beaten the game now at this point, but I still don't know if that's exactly his entire motivations. I want to give him a little bit more credit here of having actually some sort of change of heart. Now, he is using everyone, and that's all he does. He just uses people over and over and over. But I had taken several notes here. One of them being that this is like an Anakin Padme kind of situation here. Yeah. What he's creating and what he's setting up, and they're out there. It's like Star Wars Episode 2 where they're out, they're alone, they're in this place, and they're starting to kind of like be together in one way or another. That he's becoming evil, trying to help her. That I will give you this kingdom, but I'm not going to tell you what I'm going to have to do to make this kingdom, but I'm doing it for you.
Yeah.
And that's encroaches more on Star Wars Episode 3 kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And that's, I feel like there's some, which is funny, this came out before either of those movies. I'm just saying that's the feeling that I'm getting. That's what it's evoking.
Right.
But he's on a path to become worse than what he's fighting. And it's like so obvious. He can't see it, but it's so obvious, like to the viewer, to the game player, that this guy's on a path to destruction. He will destroy himself, and he will lose himself, and he will not make anything better. There's almost like a meta message here that Delita, and this goes to an earlier point we had, Delita's trying to do this without any divine help, without any assistance, without any magic, without any of that stuff. He is straight up just playing the political game, and he's going to kill people and politicalizeness himself up to the top, right? He's doing it that way. That's how he's decided to do it, and that's what he's going for. That's his aim. In order to do that, you have to become the worst person alive.
Yeah.
But that's how the current monarchs got there, so it's like, you know.
What's the quote? Hold on, I'll find this quote in a second, because I stole it from my own novel.
When you said lose yourself in the process, I'm thinking of the first part of that, but I can't remember it.
I'll get it in a second, because it's great.
Okay.
But
it goes with what we were saying before, where I feel like, to some degree, the artist, Matsuno, is trying to make some type of a statement, like this kingdom is not possible without magic, right? The magic, the magic, more or less, can bring about something that's impossible. Yeah. You need magic to do what's impossible. That's kind of the definition of magic, more or less, right? Sure. You have to have that. Delita's like, no, I'm going to make utopia, and I'm not going to ask, there will be no divine assistance, there will be no magic, there will be nothing. It's all going to be just me, and I'm doing it myself, right? There's no alliance with nature, which could be seen as magic or in any other way. And Matsuno is saying that you embrace the magic to bring about. And magic for artists is just a blanket term for...
Well, like the aura sight is like an analog for just power generally, right? Like the power to rule or whatever.
You use that power for good, but you need something along those lines. I could be misinterpreting it, but that's kind of what I took.
Speaking to what you were saying about trying to give Delita more credit, I do think it's probably important to note that nobody just like flips and turns into the exact opposite of what they were, or the person they were fighting all along.
No, but that goes into my next
one
note.
Event, right?
Yeah.
So like, it's not like Delita was this person, and then Tetra died and he became this person.
Yeah.
This is a gradual process.
It's a gradual process.
And he's in the midst of that process even now. So even what he's saying might be, he might have some authenticity in what he's saying. He might actually mean it to a certain degree. And so it might not be like pure deceit, like he's just lying to Ovelia about about wanting to build a kingdom for her or whatever. I don't mean to imply that. But what I do mean is that if you're seeing this as this is a really weird change for Delita, just understand that this is not over being developed yet.
I see.
And there's more to it than what he's saying. And you will learn that through all the way to like literally the final scene with Delita in the game.
Yeah.
So
have you seen Band of Brothers?
No.
Oh man, it came out like 20 years ago, but it's a great American propaganda piece. But it's a good show. I think Spielberg directed it himself, and there's a character in it named, I think is a Sergeant Spears. He is like the most fearless person in battle. He just goes up there, he runs right through the bullets, he goes there, he does things that everyone's afraid to do. And he comes out of it alive still. And it's like, this is crazy. How is this guy accomplishing this? Somebody asks him at one point, he says, how do you do what you do? You're crazy. I can't believe you're doing this. And he says, well, it's simple. You just have to accept the fact that you're already dead. Yeah. Once you got that letter that notified you that you're being drafted into the military,
you're dead.
Accept
your life's over.
Accept that you're dead. And once you accept that you're dead, you can do so many things.
Yeah.
And if you die,
because there's no fear.
So what? Yeah, you're dead. You already died. It doesn't matter, right? And so somehow, and that psychologically is probably weird. I can't quite wrap my head around it, but I can see how someone in a military position would kind of be forced into that type of a situation.
Yeah.
But with Delita having survived that explosion that killed his sister, the sister I guess was killed right before that, but it's all part of the same event. Having survived that moment with the thought like, this is a second lease on life kind of thing. Like, I've been granted a new lease. Basically, I died, and now I'm back.
Right.
I am going to, do things that I never would have done in my first life, so to speak, that I never would have done before I, so to speak, died, right? I feel like his courage has come from that place, that he's like, I am or / may be already dead. And so I've got nothing to lose, and it's like he's free now, and he can do things that he was never going to do before, that he never could, never would do before. He lost the closest people to him, and he is like, in some sense, like he's free to break the binds that bounded him.
The bonds.
The bonds
that
bound
him.
That bound him. There you go. To break the bonds that bound him previously. But he had to die in order for that to happen. Yeah. Like almost literally he had to die. And I feel like that could explain a lot of the abrupt transition that a lot of people may feel with Delita, is that he is in that Sergeant Spears space, right? He has accepted something, and because of that, he is able to do incredible things, like way, way amazing things. But he won't quite accept help from anyone, including nature or magic or the divine, which clearly exists in this game. He's going to just make it himself, and of course,
because he does not want to be a puppet for anyone or anything.
Exactly.
I'm done being used by anyone else.
Now he's the puppet master.
Using you.
Yeah, he's now the puppet master.
Exactly right.
So I thought that was fun. There you go.
Anything else on that one, or?
No, that's about all I got there. That was just a really good scene, and we don't see much of Delita for the next little while.
Yeah, it's a bit before you see him again. The next battle is at the Grog Heights. These are a group of Southern Sky deserters who are like, we're running away, don't chase us.
Yes.
And it's like, we're not here to fight you. And like, wait a minute, that's the heretic Ramza. If we bring his head, they'll pardon us for deserting. It's a pretty naive thing.
My note here says, wow, we just totally slaughtered all those deserters. That was strange. I don't know about the way that all went down. Clearly, we needed a battle. There was an opportunity for a battle, and this is a thing that's happening, and they're showing us. But the way that everyone that we fight becomes like just a really horrible person right before we kill them so that we're justified in killing them, it's very convenient. It's like, oh, we're deserters. Oh yeah, they don't want war. They want peace. They're leaving so they can go be with their families. Oh, wait a second, guys. We could totally murder. They even say it, like a dead or alive. Like, let's just kill him, right? We can kill this guy, and that would solve all of our problems. It's like, that was, talk about abrupt changes. That's a really, and I do get that may be a plausible thing to happen, but Ramza is very lucky that this keeps happening to him so that he can have clean hands.
Well, there would be no battle otherwise, which means we'd have no level.
So we need a justification every single time to kill the people we kill. And fair enough.
They may not always land for everybody.
It just is weird and very convenient.
This didn't bother me. It seemed, like you said, plausible as deserters, because it's like, what do they think they're going to do? They're going to live in the streets? They're obviously being hunted by Orran Durai right now.
Yes.
Maybe it's okay, we made that decision rashly. What do we do now? We're screwed. Oh, here's an opportunity to hopefully get pardoned or something.
And you would think, oh, let's capture him. We don't have to kill him. But of course, they throw in, let's just kill him, you know,
Dead or alive.
just to spice it up
Bring
so
his
that
head.
we can kill them in return.
Right. Defend ourselves.
Yes.
But the conversation with Durai at the end of the battle, or at
it's
the end of the battle,
very good.
very good. So this is where he reveals he's the adopted son of Count Sidolphus, Thunder God Sid.
Yep, Orlando, right?
And we know that he's one of the few nobles in the Order of the Southern Sky under Goltanna's banners who actually cares about the people here.
And who wants peace.
So Orran is probably going to have a similar sentiment or share similar feelings, right?
It's good.
I didn't copy any dialogue from this exchange, but the exchange is really good. It's just really well written how they're cautious of each other, but at the same time, they're understanding each other and they're like, okay, I feel like I can trust you. I feel like you're one of the good people in all of this garbage mess of nobles who are evil.
So
I can't do much to directly help you.
Right.
They're both kind of back and forth like this, but can you take a message, Ramza says to Orran, to your father, that he shouldn't be fighting Larg, he should be fighting the people who are manipulating him from behind the scenes. That's who we should really be fighting. He's like, well, my father has spies, they're trying to uncover this, you probably know more than us since you're the heretic here, right?
Yeah.
But we're trying, you know, we're making an attempt to like find out what's really going on here, like don't worry about that. What were you going to say?
Well, it's lucky that Orran didn't have orders to kill us, otherwise we would have slaughtered his whole company right then and there. Because he was just carrying out orders. He kills people for his job.
And then the story would have never gone into the stone to begin with.
And then who knows? Who knows? A lot of the other people we killed, maybe they would have written great
things about
great stories and truthful things for the history books.
That's funny.
But we also learned that Ramza's father was the only good friend of Orlando. They were. Like, Ramza's father only had one good friend, and it was this guy, this Sid feller.
Thunder God.
And so they do have a mutual respect for each other, and I really liked how that scene played out. They don't know if they can trust each other or not. But Orlan does reveal that, hey, you're a heretic, and I know that, and I actually knew that when we first met.
Yeah.
But I didn't do anything about it because you helped me out, and that's that. And so with that moment where Orlan kind of seemed to recognize us there, that was that. He was recognizing us as a heretic to be brought in by the church. But he didn't do it. So he clearly will pick and choose which rules he's willing to follow and which ones he will excuse.
Yeah, particularly
which
because
is a good quality to have.
They are currently suspicious of the church anyways.
Exactly.
And they're trying to uncover a plot there.
Yeah.
So they know something fishy's going on.
We don't learn much from him other than, good, we don't have to kill Orlan. Because with this game, and this is a great, to the credit of the storytellers here, you don't know who's friend or foe. You don't know who to trust. You don't know who you will have a conversation with 1 minute and literally be in battle the next. You don't know if your brothers are good or bad or any of this stuff. You don't know anything about this, and it can so quickly and easily turn into a situation where it's like, we have to fight even though we don't want to. And you don't know who's going to live or who's going to die and who's going to come out on top. And that's to the credit of the storyteller. People want that in a story. People want a story where they can't guess how it's going to end, you know?
Right.
And this is well done here.
Yeah, it's a really good scene. Next battle is at the walled city of Yardro.
Oh, wait, one more line. This was weird.
This
was a Japanese line a little bit, and I kind of want to know what it says on more of the lines. But we bring up the Germonic.
Oh, Germonique scriptures.
The Germonique to Orlan briefly. But the way it's written in the PS1 version, he says, here's the Germonic, no, nothing. I read that line and I was like, that's freaking weird. There's no way that was translated correctly. And it wasn't quite translated correctly. Right, in the Japanese, he says, koko ni, and this is great, because it's Germonique. Germonique, that's it. Germonique, that's how they pronounce Germanic. Germonique ya nantemonai, which means no. Okay, so he says here, this here Germonique, nah, never mind. That was what it should say.
Yeah.
Was like, this Germonique, nah, never mind. That's how it should have gone.
But the way it's written
is, here's the Germonique. It sounded like he was offering it to him.
Yeah, it's like he's beginning to think, I can trust you enough to tell you this, actually, maybe I shouldn't. Maybe I should rethink that.
And I assumed that's what it meant,
Yeah.
but the PS1 version wasn't super clear about that. And in the Japanese, it is clearer that he says, Koko ni Germonique, iya, nandemo nai.
Yeah.
And then they leave. And it's perfect. It makes a lot more sense. It's way, way clearer that he's like, never mind, instead of nothing. He's in the English here, he says, no, nothing. But what he really says is, never mind.
Yeah.
And never mind is important.
In the War of the Lions version, the conversation goes like this. Ramza says, you know of the High Confessor's plot? And Orran says, of it, yes, but we have no hard evidence. Our spies are working tirelessly, but I suspect you know more than they. Ramza says, if you did have evidence of the plot, would you then be willing to lay down your swords? And Orran says, such evidence exists. And Ramza says, the scriptures, no, it matters not. I simply wish to know.
Perfect. That's way better. Because the word scriptures can mean a
lot of things.
Yeah. But in this one, we literally told him the Germonique.
Yeah.
Or
specifically which book of scripture.
Yeah, which is, most people raised in the church's tradition would know very quickly what he's talking about. They'll be like saying, well, this Judas, never mind. It's like, wait, wait, what? What are you talking about, man? What are you talking about? Now I'm interested, Mm-hmm. But that was better translated there, so that's great.
Yeah, so it's well done. Another
But yeah,
example
that is a good reveal there that he doesn't quite
the
trust
War of
him.
the Lions script being better. Okay, Yardro. Ready to move on to Yardro now?
Yeah, my first note here is that these cutscenes are so packed with meaning and subtlety that it's amazing.
It's incredible.
They're elusive, but revealing enough such as to pique your interest.
Yeah.
Right? Because they're not so direct. It's so good.
Particularly with this subplot with Marach and Rafa, it's a little bit, I don't want to call it's not censored per se in the PS1, but it's softened quite a lot.
Oh, really?
As to what you get in this version. And so I want to talk about that because this whole scenario just makes my freaking skin crawl.
Really?
Like oh man, and the lines, they just get more quotable almost as the game goes on. It's just like they're so good, the way that they're written. So we're introduced here to Marach again, who was the one who set up the exchange for Alma and the scriptures of Germonique. But he has a sister named Rafa, and they're arguing about the integrity of the Grand Duke Barrington who raised them. Rafa's main contention here is the only reason he took us in is because we have these unique gifts. She explains a little bit about what those are in the scene that follows the battle, and I think I took a direct quote so that we can just quote what she says about that.
Okay, good.
But they have some kind of magical ability or some sort of ethereal
like a technique
that they have that they're born with, and the Grand Duke Barrington wanted to use them for that, and so he came to their village wanting to take them, and the village elder said no way, and so Barrington burned down their village and slaughtered the village and just took them as children into his own house. Rafa's trying to explain this to Marach, and Marach does not want to believe that. He does not want to believe his father is an evil man, right? So he's abusive to her too. Marach slaps her in the scene, like, how dare you say that about our father, kind of thing, right? But it was really sickening to me that he did this after she made this accusation. Or after she made this accusation. Did I write it down? Oh, I didn't write it down. Not the first part. This is all in the scene that follows after. But she accuses the Duke of having raped her or molested her in some fashion. And that's when Marach slaps her. Like, how dare you say that? Wow. So this was highly effective at making me hate the Duke and Marach both. I didn't, and this is going to kind of go into something that's been a bit of a recurring topic for us in terms of characters that get redemption or not, or have to die.
Yes.
And how I felt particularly about Marach's redemption in all of this.
About his arc, yeah.
I didn't think he apologized well enough to be forgiven for his refusal to believe his own sister had been molested and victimized by this man, and his adherence and loyalty to the man over his sister. I found to be highly despicable. And it was very hard for me to accept that Marach is allowed to come back to life and be forgiven. And I was just like, I know this is going to be some case that I will have to talk about because we talk about it so much. But anyways, you come upon this scene, and she runs out to us. Help me, please. Like, I'm trying to escape from this situation. Yeah. And Marach admits in the battle he's willing to kill his own sister over this. Yeah. And it's just like, dude, I hate this guy, right?
Yeah.
Anyways, if you win the battle, he teleports and escapes.
Of course.
And you have a really nice scene with Rafa after this. And there's some really great lines here. This line from Ramza was good because they're talking about the Grand Duke Barrington. He set up like a lot of orphanages, apparently. And Ramza says this about him. He erected a great many orphanages in the war's wake. It was a noble gesture of less than noble intent. He wanted assassins. The orphanages gave him a pool of willing young minds, allowing him to select the very best to groom and train. So I don't like when people victimize or take advantage of children like this.
Right.
It's like, to me, the Grand Duke Barrington is almost the most evil character in the story.
Oh, really?
Based on what he did to Rafa, based on the fact that he set up orphanages to groom children.
So when you say that this was softened in the PS1 version, that's what you're referring to, right?
Yeah, I don't think this was as clear in the PS1 version that he did all of these things. And particularly what he did to Rafa is enormously softened.
Yeah.
But she does say this about their about who they are, her and Marach. We Golthanans, or Golthanas, are keepers of a sacred art passed down through the generations. My brother and I are conduits, I of the heavens and he of the nether. We channel their power through mantra. Grand Duke Barrington desired that power for his own. When our elder refused him, the Grand Duke put our entire village to the torch. And then I want to read a couple of the lines directly here that she says. So Marach, this is at the beginning of the battle, Marach's saying, have you forgotten who it was that saved us and took us in? He opened his heart to us, all these sorts of things. Like, how could you repay that kindness with treachery? And she says, feed us he did, Marach, but we were supped on lies. I know the truth now. It was the Grand Duke himself who set fire to our village, his hand hidden by the smoke of war. And do you know why? Why he killed everyone we ever knew? It was for our gifts. You and I possess power, and power is all he craves. He burnt down our entire village that he might claim the sacred power of our mantras for his own. Opened his heart, you say? The man is not possessed of one. It is you who need to open your eyes, Marach. Okay, that's when he walks up and slaps her in the face. Then he says, I'll not abide your ill-mannered tongue. And she says, you know, don't you? You know what the thing he did to me. You're my brother, you know of this, and even yet you...
Oh, so she didn't inform him of this just then.
Yes, it was
this
after
is something he had known for that long.
He's like, you have to know that he's done this, right?
Yeah.
You're not going to sit here and pretend you don't know he did this to me. And his response is, speak not another word, you stir a rage in me, Rafa. I am your brother and your elder, and I will not have you question me. I hated Marach's response. I hated him for this. His sister is trying to tell him how she was victimized, and he would rather hold to his adopted Grand Duke father loyalty to him than listen to his own flesh and blood. And anyways, this made it difficult for me to forgive him.
Yeah.
Made it really difficult for me to forgive him. But then in the later, when she's talking with Ramza, right? She talks to him a little bit about, why are you fighting? He's like, oh, I don't fight for gratitude. I'm a Beowulf. I fight for the honor of my name. And she's like, I don't believe that. Like, you don't strike me the sort of man who fights for things so trite. Yeah. You see evil and injustice before your eyes, and you can't turn away. You're a good person. You're not fighting for the honor of your name, kind of thing. He's like, whatever. Let's not talk about that anymore. Tell me more about yourself. And then she's talking about her brother here, and so I think this is where they tried to build the case for his redemption. So I want to be fair to this interpretation and read this part. In her words, she's talking about her brother. He refuses to accept the truth. We were orphaned in a war, you see. We lost our parents, our home, all but our lives. The memories haunt me even now. Climbing mounds of rubble in search of any scrap of food, the air thick with death's foul stench. That was the life from which the Duke spared us. At the time, I thought it sure the gods had sent him. So this is what Marach wants to believe about the Grand Duke, right? And this is where Ramza says the stuff I already read. Okay. I imagine the joy he must have felt when he discovered the two of us among the other orphans. It turns my stomach. So she's like, oh, he killed everyone. He's so glad that we survived because he could use us, right? So when you learned of this, you tried to flee, says Ramza. She says, my brother and I loved the man as though he were our father, but even that did not stop him from, and she can't like bear to say it. So he molested her. He raped her, whatever it was, right? And Marach does not want to believe that about him. Now, that being said, the next set of battles, well, there's one more in the Yugwood, which is like nothing important to have. It's a total filler battle. But the next set of battles is leads to the end of chapter 3.
And the rooftop thing, yeah.
Yeah, the Riovanes Castle. And this is where people need to be very careful to make a backup save. This is the spot.
I figured.
Where you can get caught in battles that you cannot leave to go train or buy new equipment or rearrange things really very much. This is the spot where you definitely need a backup save because these are very hard fights if you're not prepared for them. And
there's multiple stages.
There's multiple stages of it.
Yeah.
And you can't leave.
The enemy has multiple stages. Like you'll beat him, you think you beat him.
And it's not over.
And then you have to fight him again in his higher form.
In my tips video for Final Fantasy Tactics, my 10 tips on how to get started, I was talking about Zodiac compatibility in the, it might be a little bit too late to be giving this advice now, but in the tips I said, if you don't want to worry too much about this, just pick Capricorn and just be with Virgo and Taurus and you're good.
Yeah.
The battle against Wygrif here, if you are a Capricorn, it increases his compatibility against you, meaning he will do more damage to you, making the probably hardest fight in the game even harder.
Even harder.
So it might have been better to be Pisces. I tried to make that note in the comments. Now that being said, I've been Capricorn every time I've played the game and I've won this battle. There are other ways to overcome that particular problem. I think as I was watching my footage, what I did is I equipped an ability that is like a critical HP recover. So when he does damage and you go into critical mode, you heal yourself.
Nice.
And I was using an ability to increase my bravery to maximum so that your bravery affects not just your damage with certain weapons, but also the chance of your reaction abilities happening. So if it's at 100, you have a 100% chance of your reaction ability being activated. So if it's first strike, if they attack you, you'll attack them first every time. I had critical HP recover on, so he would come and do 170 damage to me, put me in critical mode, I would just heal myself.
Immediately.
And then just sit there and buff and buff and buff for the next part of the fight, which is against Belius. And I just kind of locked Wygraf in this pattern of him trying to do the same attack and me just healing every time, and him attacking me just healing. So there are ways around that problem if you're a Capricorn and you find the fight very hard.
Right.
You won't be able to leave this battle to go get the ability I just said.
If you're at this point.
So make sure you make a backup save so that you can go get some abilities you might want to use in the fight or something like that, or change your class or something. Just make a backup save before you go to Riovanes. That's all I'm saying. It's really freaking hard. Okay. But this scene between Falmarv and Duke Barrington is like fantastic.
It's so good.
Oh,
this is one of
goodness, is it good?
This is one of the
This is one of the better scenes in the game, and every
so
scene in the game is good, so that's saying something.
Yes. And even we come back here a little bit later on, and it's
just so awesome.
It's very good.
This whole conclusion to the third act is just like
it's
phenomenal.
Very good. It's very good.
So you have Falmarv coming in. He's been invited there by Duke Barrington. And there's just a lot of great quotable lines. The fencing and words I've been talking about that I really love. I have an affinity for that. This is stuff I live for, I wrote. It's just, I love this dialogue.
Yeah.
Basically, the Duke is aware of the plot of the Church of Glabados. And he's revealing slowly that he knows this, and Falmarv is trying to kind of deny it or like, just more or less dismiss that whole idea about this Arasite stones. How do you believe a legend? I would not have thought you to be a man to believe in these kind of fantasies. And it's like he has the upper hand, and then that's what I love about scenes like this. You feel like the upper hand changes throughout the scene. It feels like at first Falmarv clearly is the one in charge, but then Barrington starts to reveal some things, and it's like he's slowly taking momentum of the situation away, and now he feels like he's the one in charge, and he brings Marach in, and he's got a stone, and anyways, and then it switches again very abruptly, and Falmarv, as a holder of one of these stones, who is possessed by a demon himself, just freaking massacres everybody.
Everybody, including
his own son.
His own son.
Who did not
rough.
know.
He had no idea.
He did not know
this
what was happening.
This is Islud from earlier. We encountered him earlier.
Right.
Had no idea.
And it was really interesting because he comes in and Falmarv slaps him. Is like, you worthless son or something like that.
He didn't beat us.
Yeah, because it was. Yeah. It was somehow he was implicating him in having tipped the Duke off into understanding the plot that's really going on.
Oh, and that's why he gets slapped. I thought it was
not on purpose, but also because of his other failures.
Know. He doesn't know what not to say.
He doesn't really know what's going on.
Yeah, interesting.
Anyways, I love, that's what you should be going for as a writer in your scenes. There's a conflict in the scene, and what makes it interesting all the way through the end is if you're seeing a momentum or an upper hand sort of shift. You do this in fight scenes too.
Oh,
or
yes,
like
always.
War scenes or whatever. You see one side. It's like Rocky.
Yes. Oh yeah.
You have one guy with the upper hand, but then that switches and the momentum's going back and forth. This is the sort of thing you want, not just in battle scenes or in combat, but also in people confronting each other philosophically or with words or trying to outwit one another.
That's partly why Rocky is so good.
Yeah.
Because spoiler alert for a 50-year-old movie, he doesn't win that fight.
No.
I believe it's a draw, right? Or he loses. Did he lose or was it a draw?
I believe he loses.
Either way, he does not win. He doesn't win that fight. But the competition between spirit versus like elite.
Yeah, he loses in that.
Yeah, okay, so he loses the first fight. But everyone cheers for him because in some weird-ish way, he won the fight that he was fighting.
It's a moral victory.
Yeah, which was very valuable. And in the story, the philosophy of bravery versus just raw power, and he triumphed in a different way, So even that story, even that fight scene isn't about the fight. It's about this other competing idea that's hanging over the fight the whole time.
Right.
That's the way to write a good story. I think you're right.
So you got to have the momentum shifting or the upper hand shifting between the characters. That's what keeps it interesting. If like one side is dominating too much, it starts to get a little boring. It's like, oh, okay, this is the situation. You need to have a reveal that, ooh, this changes things. That like piques the interest of the reader or the viewer again. Okay, what's going to happen now? Oh, this other element that changes the context. This person's now, winning. So
that's hard to do, but I will say for movies, you will have a fight coordinator or a stunt coordinator.
Yes.
If you're writing a story with this kind of a thing,
yes,
that's you.
Yes.
You're the philosophy coordinator.
Yes.
You have to make this interesting, which means you got to do your homework and you got to read up on this stuff and understand like what types of things would compete and would be interesting.
Right. So Barrington sends Marach out to face us because we've just arrived, but that's before Falmarv transforms and massacres everybody in there.
Yeah.
Apparently the Duke himself escapes, but like the soldiers are all like horrifically slaughtered. And when you get done with the fight with Marach outside, and Rafa kind of leaves your party for a while to go after him, the door to like the front gate opens, and there's just a wounded soldier who comes out, who says, "Claws and fangs, gods have mercy."
Yes.
Like, what is happening?
Yeah.
Like, just what is this devilry? What is this?
Yep.
Something really messed up happened inside. It's not just Falmarv, but Wygraf has also transformed into Gigas,
Yes.
Belius or whatever, and is killing people. And so you hurry inside, and this is where you face Wygraf. But he sees the slaughter that's happening. He just sees guards dead everywhere. And so he's battling with words with Wygraf again. You would sell your soul to the Lucavi to slake your thirst for revenge. Great line.
I believe at that point, this is where he says one of the lines I wrote was, "How miserable you are."
Yeah.
It's just great. Just like, that's like a perfect insult.
Yeah, it's really good.
Yeah,
and, of course, Wygraf has witty comebacks as well. But
very much so.
This battle's really tough. So there's many approaches to beating it. Just like I said, make sure you have a backup save so you can play around with how you approach this fight.
Yeah.
But after you beat Wygraf, he transforms into Belius. You bring because it's a one-on-one battle. It's just you against Wygraf. And I remember the first time I ever saw this game in person. Landon or Parker, I can't remember who it was stuck on this battle. And could not win this battle. It was like, I don't know what to do. I can't win.
I don't remember it was this one, but I do remember that there was a battle he was stuck on.
I literally can't win. Like, what do I do? I can't leave. I saved, so I'm stuck. And he was locked out. This is one of the many friends I talked about in my tips video who got stuck in this part and couldn't freaking progress.
Yeah.
Because you have no warning of it coming. Anyways, your people come in the second part of the fight. He transforms into Belius. He has some monsters that come in. And if you win that fight, you get a scene where Alma walks in on the carnage from earlier that Falmarv did in the room with Barrington.
Yeah.
And Falmarv...
well, Islud is the one who's alive still, right?
Yeah, he's barely alive, but he's like, there's blood smeared
you're right,
all over
but
the
Volmarv,
wall.
that's right. This is where Volmarv comes in.
He comes in after she goes to him. So she goes to the side of Isildur.
So that is that's like that scene was so good. With her talking with Islud was absolutely wonderful.
Yeah.
It was so well done.
He finally realized that what Ramza had been telling him was correct.
Was true.
He was like laying there dying in a pool of his own blood from his father's own hand.
He didn't know that he was dying.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's so sad, but it's so like, it's just so well done. It's
and he
crazy.
carries an aura sight and he gives it to her. Right, like take this, give it to Ramza kind of thing.
She puts it in her pocket.
Yep.
But during that whole dialogue, he's saying things like he's just talking to Alma, saying, "Yeah, this happened and this happened. Where's my sword? I need my sword."
Yeah.
And then
he can't even hold it. His hand's not responding.
He keeps asking for light. So he's talking and he's saying, "Why is it so dark in here?" But these things are interjected amongst. You don't ever get didactically, directly told he's gonna die.
Yeah.
But based on what he's saying, he can't see. Yeah. He can't feel his arms. He doesn't know. He keeps asking for his sword. He keeps saying,
I gotta do something.
I can't feel my arms. You know he's going to die.
Yeah.
And it's like, but it's shocking. He hasn't accepted it. He doesn't know what's happening. He thinks that he should be able to just get up and go and keep moving. But he can't. And it's like, it's heartbreaking, but it's like so well done. It's so well done.
It's really good.
Yeah.
And this is where Falmarv actually comes in. And he starts approaching Alma there, and he's threatening to kill her. But then his Virgo stone stirs in her presence. Yeah. And he mentions something about having found someone who he thought they might have to spend centuries more searching for.
Yes, and he just accidentally found.
Oh, could this be the one type of thing?
Right.
And that's when he decides to take Alma rather than kill her.
To do the gut punch knockout.
The solar plexus.
Take her.
And just like take her with him.
Yeah.
So he kidnaps Alma and they leave. Now this is some of the dialogue that really made my skin crawl with Duke Barrington on the top of the roof in the third fight.
Oh yeah, well, by the way, there was also the implication here I think this is, somebody mentions this within the dialogue, that the stones will be activated and they become possessed by the evil spirit afterwards, depending on who's calling upon it and why they're doing it.
Yes.
That I think that's more directly stated at this point.
Yeah, it comes up after this when Ramza tries to stop Rafa from using the stone, and he realizes, oh, it didn't do what I thought it was going to do. And
so that comes up a little bit later.
A little after
They
this.
mention it earlier here, but then it's perfectly directly explained here, yeah.
Yeah. So, on the rooftop, Rafa is confronting Barrington, and she's threatening her vengeance on him.
Yeah.
And he's like, how dare you, how ungrateful of you after all I've done. Just total gaslighting language here.
Right, yeah.
Just awful gaslighting. It's just horrible, considering what he's done.
Yes.
And I took down this line that just it just gave me chills. It was so creepy. He says, the flesh remembers Rafa. It remembers fear, cold, and trembling, but it will not always be so. In time, your fear will blossom into another flower, and I shall have that one as well. I was like, oh my God.
Oh, that's rough,
This
dude.
guy has got to die. I hate this man.
Was not explained. Well, the metaphor of plucking a flower is that of taking virginity,
Right.
more or less, right? That is that's rough.
That
was not in the PS1 version, at least not to that
Yes.
extent.
Right.
It may have even said something like that, but I didn't realize what it was talking about. That's
Yes.
crazy.
This is what's so powerful about the dialogue in this game, is it's not on the nose like that. This is in the subtext of what he's saying, right? The subtext in this game is just phenomenal.
Yes.
But that line in particular, it just makes you piece that together, what he's really saying there, and it's just like, oh man. Oh, it's so bad.
Yeah.
It's so bad. And she's just furious. She got a sword drawn. He's got like a gun, basically, pointed at her. This is where Marach enters the scene.
This is the redemption moment.
And realizes she was telling the truth.
Yes.
This is the kind of man Barrington is. He's like, you really meant that, didn't you? Like what you just said.
Right.
And so they're both confronting him. Marach jumps in front of a bullet to save her. So he takes the bullet and pushes her into cover. And this is where we arrive and try to help her. But before we have a chance to attack Barrington, the Marquis de Limbury, who we saved in the first chapter of the game, comes with some of his people, and they just literally pick him up and toss him off the roof. Just throw him to his death.
This is one of the power dynamic things within the game, where it's like, who's in charge? Like, you think you get, this is the mastermind behind the plot. Wait, what? Boom. Yeah, it's so funny.
And so it's like, okay, he's more or less expressing some form of gratitude for saving him earlier.
Yeah.
Listen, this doesn't have to end in a fight. Just give me the Oracite. We'll just go our separate ways.
Yeah. This is where you realize that there is an even higher power that's like really kind of shaping everything behind the scenes.
Yeah.
And it's like, whoa, who are, like, then on the flanks, there are two other beings that just kind of appear.
Yeah.
And it's like, who are these people? Like, this is like a whole different level from what we've been dealing with. It seems like these are some people who are in truer power from a different realm, right?
I would be remiss not to mention that this fight sucks.
No, yes, it is very difficult.
It's possibly the worst designed fight in the whole game.
Yeah.
If they even knock out Rafa, it's game over.
Right.
It's not like usual where you have a team member go down and they have 3 turns before they crystallize or die or whatever.
Yeah.
And if you win the fight before that
Then
happens, you can still win, and they'll come back to life at the end of the battle. So there's permadeath in the game, but you get several turns before they actually die.
This was one of the things that I hated about the game early on, when I played it like 20 years ago, was the permadeath feature. Because as soon as I'd lose one character, I'd be like, I'm done playing the game. And it's part of the fear of missing out thing, the FOMO, where I'm just like, if I can't be OP at everything, I don't want to do it. It was rough.
But the Marquis himself has the first strike ability, The one where if you attack him, he attacks you
yeah.
first, the reaction ability. So basically, you have to run and take out one of these people in like one turn, or else they're going to kill Rafa.
Yeah.
Like, you're just not going to be able to stop it. Your people aren't close enough to the battle on where you can put them, like when you place them before the battle starts.
Yeah.
Unless
and the range is all screwy.
and the speed. Like, they're very fast characters, so it's like your mage maybe could teleport over and get something off, but it's like you just don't have time. They will flank Rafa and kill her too fast.
Yeah.
And it's just like this battle usually ends in 1 or 2 turns. And you either win in that 1 or 2 turns, or you lose in that 1 or 2 turns. I hate this fight. It's
ridiculous.
awful, and you got to be pretty overpowered to be able to just walk over to one of the, because you're not going to kill the Marquis. He got that first strike, unless you're using magic, I guess. If you're going to melee against him, he's going to use that first strike on you.
Yeah.
So you got to run to one of the other people and just like, die in 1 hit, please, so that the battle can be over. I think in my playthrough, I had a Ramza as a combination of a ninja and a monk. So he was doing bare-fisted, high damage, but he was using 2 hands. So he gets
nice.
2 attacks each time.
Yeah, that's sweet. That's sweet.
So that's the way that I did it.
Yeah.
And it worked out for me. But this fight sucks. It's just not a well-designed fight. When you win, the Marquis challenges you to seek him back in Limbury, where he comes from, and to claim the aura site that he already carries. So he's like, come find me in Limbury and grab this aura site if that's what you want. Haha, goodbye. And then we get a scene where Rafa is mourning her brother's death. They stay together all night, and she watches the sunrise as he's lying there. Right?
And she's still talking to him, but it's unclear if he's, I believe he has already died.
Yes.
That he's
gone.
dead. But she's still talking as if he is, maybe could still hear him. Yeah.
Watching the sunrise, crying,
like they used to do.
mourning him.
Yeah.
And then she has, I think, the Taurus stone or one of the zodiac stones.
I don't remember the names, but yeah.
And she speaks as if she hears a voice coming from it. And Ramza's mind immediately goes to Wygriff.
Don't do this.
Don't talk to that person.
Yes.
Do not listen.
And that's what I'm thinking too. I'm like,
Trust
we have
me.
to fight her now.
Trust me. Don't listen to that person. But then a power, like a heavenly power, descends and revives Marach, and he comes back to life. And it's just like, wait a minute. The stones aren't just evil?
That's what I put
Right?
here. Yep.
That's a nice twist.
Maybe the stones can be used for good after all.
Yeah. Maybe they are godly in nature originally.
Right.
It's just the heart of the person using it.
It's the person.
Will either create a conduit to the nether or to the heavens.
Yeah.
And then Ramza and Marach talk about this as in the closing parts of the act here. Ramza says, I'd thought Arasite a product not of godly fashion, but an issue of hands far fouler, a gateway of sorts for Lucavi into our world. And Marach says, I know not by whose hands it came to be, but I do not think its evil inherent. I believe it is the wielder who gives its power shape. So yeah, the stones are not inherently evil. It's all about the person wielding them. Now, I still don't know how I feel about Marach getting forgiveness here. I don't feel like he apologized well enough. He took a bullet for his sister. I guess you could call that a sacrifice.
That's what the game wants, because otherwise he does have to die. The game says, is this good enough? Is this good enough,
think it
players?
might have helped a little bit if when he woke up, he had another conversation with her and said, I'm not worthy of you. I didn't believe you.
Sure.
I don't deserve your affection.
Right.
Like, I deserve to die kind of a thing. And she can say something like,
I forgive you, it's fine.
I know your heart and you were wrong, yes, but like I still love you. You're still my brother and I want you to have another chance in life or something like that. If there had been
Just
some kind of exchange
dialogues.
like that, it would have softened it, but I didn't feel like Marach ever properly apologized to his sister for not believing her.
Right.
That she was made such a horrific victim of Barrington, and the fact that he kept serving him and was willing to kill her for him.
Yeah.
Like, that's not apologized for sufficiently to me.
Yeah.
And it needs to be.
I mean, I would agree, generally speaking. I didn't get all of that context in my first playthrough, but it was way too much. It almost felt like he was being possessed himself, that he had some weird, but I don't think that's actually what happened. It just kind of felt that way because his character was too one-dimensional, was too strange. I do want to not say a fact, but offer the general perspective that I have read about. I do not have firsthand knowledge of this, and I hope to never have firsthand knowledge of this, but and I don't have sisters, and my daughter is 4, so it's like, but when something along the lines of a rape situation happens, it is whoever considers themselves to be the guardian of the woman will often
deny it because
take
they
it
failed
very hardly. Yeah, and some people would look at it as there's a sexism element here. It may be that in the fact that it's just some like older ideas of how the daughters of a culture are to be protected, just generally speaking, right? And it's like you didn't do your job. If this happened, it's your fault.
Yeah, under your
right?
watch.
And it means you weren't a good enough guardian, you weren't a good enough father, brother, whatever it is, leader, that you allowed that to happen. And it's so funny because a woman will take that hard as it should be taken hard. That is not a light thing to happen. And often women will be very critical that the men are taking it harder than they did. The father will become very distant from a daughter after that happens if the father knows about it. And he will really, really want to just pretend that it never happened and to feel like they could maybe still be, it's like they failed in their, it's like, what do I do now? Like I failed, And I'm just saying that this is how I'm not saying it should be, but it will often be the male, guardian figure who will take it even harder. And the fact that when Marach, it's different.
It probably is Marach in the PS1 version because they always reverse it.
When Marach is saying, I'm your elder, as soon as she brings something up and he slaps her and stuff, he's saying, I'm your elder, you listen to me. He's basically reasserting that I'm in charge of you and I don't believe you because I can't believe you. Because if I believed you, then I'm at fault because I'm in charge here and it would mean that I wasn't a good guardian. And that is just a perspective thing. I'm not saying he's right. I'm not saying the facts.
He wouldn't be right.
I'm saying this for the audience.
But it does create nuance to the situation.
There is something there.
There is an element of human nature in that response.
Yeah.
Again, it's not the correct response.
No,
it's a selfishly driven response.
It is the wrong response.
My failure is more important to me than your victimization, which is wrong in and of itself.
Yes.
But there is a certain element to that I hadn't considered that probably is a motivating factor in how he is acting and responding to her when she brings this up.
I would think it would lend some more realism to the situation.
Yeah, it feels convincing as a motivating factor for the character. Still wrong and something that would take self-reflection to say, this isn't about me.
Exactly.
It's about her.
That's the thing. That's the hard part. Yeah.
And I wish he had that realization
that
in dialogue with her.
Yeah.
So that he could see what he had done wrong, realize it, take ownership of that, and apologize. That's what I would have liked to have seen happen.
Well,
is all I'm saying.
And you are correct in that.
I wish that had happened. Okay. This is where it comes to the end. I just
I just had one more.
Oh, sure.
One more note here in general, saying if the stones merely work off your emotion, they can be said, as I brought up earlier, to be working based on the gods of ancient times, right? Like possession of a spirit, right?
Right.
That you are possessed by Odin or something as you go to war, and you invite the spirit into your being, and you go and enact what Odin would do, where he, that's part of just possession by one of the gods. But it's philosophical and it's emotional. It's not so much a substantial thing. It's like it's an idea kind of idea, and it's a battle of ideas here. So this is like possession of a spirit of God. The God that possesses you will manifest through the stone. So one with a good heart will find the stones to do good work. This is kind of speculation, that last line there.
Yeah.
But you invite the God that you want to help you. So this would be a polytheistic world here. Mm-hmm. and you can invite the god of up or down, but there's an opposition to both. So there's a good Aquarius and a bad Aquarius. There's a good Virgo and a bad Virgo.
Yeah. Well, the heavens and the nether, which is part of their powers, like the Marach Rafa thing, like she's like the heaven conduit and he's the nether conduit.
Oh, there you go. You're right, because one of them, because their powers are kind of like they oppose each other a little bit.
The yin yang.
They've got that yin yang thing going on. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, that's a good point. Anyways, frustration with the growing stalemate, the Order of the Northern Sky recalled its full force from the war's now expensive front. They marched on Fort Basilet with plans to turn the tide of the war. Ramza decides to meet Delita. He believes Falmarv is the puppet master here. So that's where he's going next. Ramza's going to find Delita to talk to him about things. And that's going to be the start of Chapter 4, which we'll cover next week. Thank you for watching. We got to get Kasim to the train station now. Last episode next week. See you then.
Be there, be square.
Peace out.